A carriage rattles along a sun-dappled forest path, its wheels turning with a steady clatter. Lancet, the capital of the Harkia Empire, looms ahead, its white spires shining under the bright sky. Peering through the carriage window, the blonde-haired girl named Ivy gazes at the city with wide-eyed wonder. Ivy exclaims that the palace is even more magnificent than the books described to the smiling headmistress. Nearby, a purple-haired woman and a man in red sneer at the child's humble upbringing and provincial nature. Noticing their judgmental stares, Ivy looks back and realizes the couple is talking about her. A gentle, reassuring hand comes to rest on Ivy's shoulder with a soft, comforting pat. The brown-haired headmistress smiles warmly, finding her own sense of fascination in the sights of the capital city. When Ivy asks, the headmistress confirms that returning to the capital feels fresh and exciting for her. Dazzled by the abundance of the market, Ivy watches as the headmistress points out the variety of fruits. The man in red condescendingly remarks that Ivy must be from the countryside after seeing her shocked reaction. He tells the group to take their time, mocking Ivy as a simple country kid visiting the palace. The headmistress calmly retorts that there is no rush since Ivy will be living in the palace. Stunned, the man in red demands to know how a child like her could possibly live there. He suspects a swindle, but the headmistress chuckles and clarifies that Ivy isn't there for a job. Ivy smiles softly to herself, clutching her dress as she reflects on the journey that brought her here. Another gray-haired man is completely startled when he hears that the girl has been admitted to the academy. The headmistress beams with pride as the men wonder how Ivy managed to enter such a prestigious institution. Ivy remembers how the headmistress was the happiest person of all when the acceptance notice finally arrived. In a warm flashback, the headmistress joyfully lifts a cheering Ivy to celebrate her successful application. Ivy acknowledges that without the headmistress's support, she never would have been able to apply. The memory shifts to a dark inn, where the headmistress hears a sudden, violent thud coming from nearby. A red-haired woman screams at the young girl, calling her useless and ordering her to get out. The cruel woman demands gratitude for raising the child, while a tiny Ivy trembles on the floor. Ivy begs for forgiveness and offers to do anything as the woman ruthlessly casts her out. Just as Ivy pleads for mercy, the headmistress intervenes, shouting at the woman for mistreating a child. Finding Ivy malnourished and weak, the headmistress offers comfort, though the girl insists she is fine. The headmistress scolds the red-haired woman for neglect, but the woman argues that the child must earn food. Folding her arms, the red-haired woman tells the headmistress not to interfere with a child she won't raise. When the headmistress offers to take Ivy, a greedy, calculating look crosses the red-haired woman's face. The woman refuses to hand the girl over for free, citing the high cost of raising her. She begins to calculate the perceived value of the child while leaning casually against the doorframe. The headmistress is horrified when the woman demands an absurd sum of 10,000 gold for the girl. Although Ivy tries to hide her pain, the headmistress notices the marks of abuse on her face. Deeply moved and determined, the headmistress vows to take the child away from her miserable life. Kneeling, she tells Ivy to come with her, promising that everything will finally be all right. Ivy clings to her savior in a desperate hug, feeling safe and loved for the very first time. Settling at the headmistress's shelter, Ivy began cleaning to pay for the school she was now attending. Now a bit older, Ivy happily heads out from the shelter, ready to start her day at school. She pauses as she hears the sounds of a struggle and shouting coming from the hallway. A boy and girl argue over a single potato, both desperate and hungry in the shelter's halls. Stepping in, Ivy offers her own piece of bread to the boy to settle their dispute. Ivy smiles brightly, making the boy promise not to take back the deal after receiving the food. Walking away, Ivy decides to ignore her own hunger, fueled by a desire to help the headmistress. Her attention is caught by a notice for the Imperial Gifted Academy recruiting new students. She reads that the academy provides all food, clothing, and housing, which sparks a new hope. Seeing a way to ease the headmistress's burden, Ivy's green eyes sparkle with newfound determination. Ivy tells an official she wants to earn money and help the shelter after she graduates. Returning to the present, Ivy gently taps the headmistress on the shoulder to get her attention. With stars in her eyes, Ivy proudly holds up the official acceptance letter from the academy. Blonde-haired Ivy prays in secret, pleading with her parents for a miracle to pass the academy's entrance exam. Her hands tremble as she admits that thoughts of them usually make her throat tighten with sadness. Gazing at a shooting star, she whispers a heartfelt wish to meet her mother and father just once. A clatter of wheels signals their arrival at the bustling entrance, where carriages and horses fill the courtyard. Ivy and the headmistress marvel at the massive crowd, feeling as if the entire empire has gathered here. A loud, clear shout rings out as an official demands the attention of the noisy, gathered crowd. Raising his hand, he announces that all applicants must proceed inside alone, leaving their parents behind. The official repeats the command firmly, warning that children will not be admitted unless they enter the gates alone. A young girl sobs and clings to her father, terrified of the sudden separation from her family. Amidst the sea of weeping families, the headmistress watches the heart-wrenching scenes of parting with a heavy heart. She realizes with a pang that for most of these children, this is their very first time being separated. In stark contrast, blonde-haired Ivy remains remarkably composed, her green eyes shimmering with a quiet inner strength. The brown-haired headmistress is deeply moved by the child's courage, finding her own eyes welling up with tears. While other children struggle with fear, the brave young girl stands her ground, ready to face her future. Ivy clenches her fists and promises to study hard, urging the headmistress not to worry about her. A soft sniffle sounds as the headmistress turns away, embarrassed that she is the one crying instead of Ivy. Startled, Ivy looks up and questions why her strong protector is suddenly the one in tears. They share one final, warm embrace as white flower petals drift through the air in a moment of peace. Holding her close, the headmistress tells Ivy to contact them immediately if school life becomes too difficult. Ivy beams with a radiant, toothy smile, happily agreeing to the promise as they prepare to part ways. A loud notification rings out, announcing that the academy gates will be closing shortly for all applicants. Ivy begins her journey, running toward the entrance as the headmistress watches her small figure move toward the gate. Looking on with hope, the headmistress makes a quiet plea for Ivy to live well at the academy. Ivy pauses to look back one last time, her expression filled with determination and a lingering sense of warmth. She waves a cheerful goodbye, finally disappearing into the academy to begin her new life with a smile. In the city, a purple-haired girl mentions that it honestly feels like the academy has finally reopened. The elderly prime minister agrees, chuckling that the presence of so many children will make the halls noisy again. Nearby students whisper about Ivy, questioning how someone so small and young could possibly meet the school's standards. A sudden shout echoes from the towers as officials argue about a candidate's perceived lack of qualifications. Inside the grand meeting hall, several men debate the strict age limits and grades required for entry. One official argues for a child's family service, while another fears the consequence of raising voices before the emperor. The prime minister sighs, accepting that the debate over the academy's new students cannot be helped. The grand, blue-domed institution is revealed as an elite school for children gifted with exceptional, rare talents. History reveals it was forced to close years ago during the bloody chaos of the War for Succession. The nation stabilized long ago, but the academy remained closed because of the emperor's grief for Princess Ivn. A stylized mural depicts the tragic loss of the empress and her newborn daughter during the Succession War. The emperor deeply mourned the daughter he never saw, leaving only her name as a memory in his heart. Seeing his blank stares whenever he saw young children, many courtiers began to harbor futile ambitions for power. Stern-faced men in military dress stand in the shadows, their eyes gleaming with cold and calculating intent. Only this year did the emperor finally grant permission for the academy to reopen and recruit new students. A thud sounds as a crumpled application form is tossed onto the floor during the heated meeting. A soft rustle draws attention as the emperor's hand rests near the discarded paper during the tense debate. Emperor Clois Aurelkian Harkia gazes out with a sharp, icy stare, his presence commanding the entire room. He calls to the prime minister, his cold voice cutting through the tension of the ongoing meeting. He orders the startled elderly man to pick up the document that was just discarded on the floor. Reading the paper, the emperor demands to know why an application form was thrown away so carelessly. A nervous official stammers that the applicant from the poorhouse was rejected for lacking sufficient qualifications. The man recoils in shock as the emperor questions the logic of the academy determining his adopted child. The emperor sternly asks whoever suggested he would choose an adopted heir from among the academy students. He scolds the council for creating biased regulations that contradict his ideals and eliminate genuinely qualified talent. The blonde king reviews documents regarding a 7-year-old girl who passed the city's graduation exam. Aristocratic ministers whisper in disbelief as they examine papers showing perfect scores in every subject. The bald administrator notes that while upper schools are for older students, this child's scores are undeniable. Traditional ministers argue that high scores alone shouldn't be enough to admit a commoner into their society. Within the academy's noble halls, the elite dance and socialize, wary of any outsiders joining their ranks. Fierce competition and aristocratic pride fuel the argument against admitting a child from such a humble background. Ignoring the heated debate, the blonde king gazes thoughtfully at the entrance documents in his hands. A sudden, sharp tap sounds as the king places his hand, marked with a magical crest, on the table. Silencing the room, the king firmly orders the child's admission, leaving the ministers in a state of shock. Preparing to depart, the king instructs the stunned prime minister to follow him for further orders. The king demands that the prime minister oversee the enrollment personally to prevent any discrimination based on status. A low creak echoes as the bald prime minister exits the meeting room to carry out the royal decree. The ministers swarm the prime minister, frantically asking if His Majesty intends to adopt the commoner child. Frustrated by their greed, the Prime Minister clarifies that the king only ordered equal treatment for all students. The ministers breathe a collective sigh of relief, glad that the king didn't even ask for her name. Sifting through a mess of documents, the Prime Minister finally searches for the name of the mysterious child. Flashback to a younger, bright-eyed Evie looking around the Grand Academy with a sense of pure wonder. Lady Melody approaches the girl with a kind smile, officially welcoming young Ivy to the Academy grounds. Beaming with excitement, young Evie shakes Lady Melody's hand with enough energy to make the woman chuckle. Melody asks about the long journey from Elam, and Evie shyly shakes her head to indicate no trouble. Happiness radiates from the blonde girl as she finally experiences the dream she worked so hard to achieve. A metaphorical boom of adoration strikes Lady Melody as she finds the new student's enthusiasm incredibly cute. Handing over a blue guidebook, Melody explains the complex map and layouts of the various academy buildings. Melody advises the girl to seek out staff members if she ever gets lost within the changing classrooms. With intense focus, young Evie pores over the guidebook, determined to learn every rule of her new home. Amused by the girl's seriousness, Melody tells her there is no rush to finish reading the entire book. Grateful for the guidance, Evie smiles broadly while clutching the precious guidebook to her chest. Evie tries to return the book, but Melody gently stops her, explaining the gift is hers to keep. Watching the girl, Melody reflects on the astounding talent required for such a young child to be here. When Melody confirms that all new students receive the book permanently, Evie's emerald eyes widen in surprise. Overjoyed to own her very first book, Evie listens as Melody promises she will receive much more soon. Evie's jaw drops in shock, unable to believe that there could be even more surprises waiting for her. Melody asks if she remembers the first sentence of her admission notice regarding her stay at the academy. They speak in unison, confirming that all necessities will be provided by the school during her residency. A celebratory "whoa" escapes Evie as she enters her new dorm room, which is bathed in warm sunlight. Melody confirms it is indeed her room, highlighting the lovely view of the garden from the window. Bursting with energy, Evie explores every corner of the room, jumping on the bed in sheer delight. Melody mentions that a roommate will join her soon, and Evie feels a nervous flutter about making friends. Providing final instructions, Melody tells her to explore before heading to the dining hall for her first dinner. A rhythmic dong rings from the academy bell tower as Evie's small feet trot excitedly down the stairs. Dressed in her simple plaid dress, Evie heads toward the dining hall, eagerly anticipating a delicious royal meal. A low murmur of voices fills the hall as Evie enters, drawing the attention of other students nearby. A freckled boy in a purple suit watches her pass, his expression souring at the sight of her. Looking down his nose, the freckled boy wonders why a beggar-looking commoner is allowed within the academy. Bitterly, the boy thinks about how his brother was denied entry, while commoners like her were accepted. With a cruel smirk, the boy decides he will personally ensure the girl realizes her inferior social status. As Evie continues walking, the boy moves behind her and reaches out with a malicious intent to strike. A sharp smack sounds as the boy shoves the unsuspecting girl, intending to humiliate her in public. Falling forward with a gasp, Evie's world blurs as she braces for a painful impact against the floor. To his utter shock, the freckled boy finds himself on the ground instead, staring up at a mysterious figure. Confused and blinking, blonde-haired Ivy tries to process the sudden, startling event that just occurred to her. Her face flushed deep red, Ivy stammers as she trembles, feeling incredibly flustered by the boy's close proximity. The calm, black-haired boy with striking blue eyes stares back at her with a remarkably composed and steady expression. As he holds her steady, Ivy looks up at him, completely captivated by his calm and silent, reassuring presence. Mesmerized by his jewel-like blue eyes, Ivy finds herself lost in their clarity, comparing them to precious, brilliant gems. Ivy's green eyes sparkle with wonder, feeling as though she is being pulled into the boy's beautiful, deep gaze. A red-haired boy suddenly interrupts, asking if she is all right after the close encounter that nearly knocked her over. Flustered and embarrassed, Ivy quickly assures them she is fine, scolding herself for being so rude to helpful strangers. A fallen, brown-haired girl on the floor demands to know who the two boys think they are dealing with. The girl's face pales with sudden realization, her eyes widening as she recognizes the two influential figures before her. Students in the hallway whisper in excitement, confirming the rumors that the handsome duo has finally joined the academy. Shaking with fear, the girl identifies the boys as Lord Arcel and Lord Ruska, her arrogance vanishing instantly. She realizes with horror that they are heirs to the powerful House Ragself and the prestigious Duchy of Kalon. Standing tall with aristocratic poise, red-haired Ruska and black-haired Arsel command the attention of everyone in the hallway.
The brown-haired girl scrambles away in a panic, apologizing profusely as Ruska mocks her for running away so quickly.
Ruska shouts a final warning that he has memorized her face, while Ivy and Arsel watch the scene unfold. Arsel gently tells Ivy to seek help if bullied again, but a swarm of adoring girls suddenly rushes toward him. A wave of fans pushes Ivy aside, desperate to greet Lord Arsel and Lord Ruska as a crowd forms. Rough voices call Ivy a disappointed and lonely. Ivy laments that she missed her chance to properly thank the boys who helped her. Gazing at the massive crowd, Ivy wonders if the two boys are truly as incredible as the students claim. Overwhelmed by the bustling noise, she decides to slip away and find another opportunity to say hello next time. Ivy quietly retreats from the chaotic scene as the other students continue to flock around the popular young lords. From a distance, Arsel observes Ivy, thinking she looks much younger than expected, and wishing he could speak with her. He notes with interest that she earned a perfect score on the entrance exam, just as he did himself. Narration reveals that the small girl is the youngest student ever to be admitted into the prestigious Gifted Academy. Glowing with soft light, Ivy stands in profile, unaware of the deep impression she has made on Lord Arsel. After a long day, Arsel and Ruska sit for a meal, Arsel letting out a tired, weary sigh of relief. Another student approaches their table, asking if he could sit with them, but Arsel looks on with cold indifference. Arsel bluntly rejects the request, stating clearly that they would prefer to eat their meal in quiet, peaceful silence. Ruska scolds his friend for being so harsh, though Arsel merely suggests Ruska handle the social pleasantries for him. Focused only on his food, Ruska admits he was simply too hungry to care about anything but his meal. Nearby, Ivy politely asks to join two girls, but they cruelly tell her commoners should sit with their own kind. Another girl rudely claims a seat is taken, and Ruska notices Ivy's lonely struggle to find a place to sit. A sudden spark of connection flares as Ivy and Arsel's eyes meet across the crowded, noisy, and hostile cafeteria. Seeing Ivy walking their way, Ruska alerts Arsel, who watches her approach with a quiet and expectant look. Tapping her fingers nervously, Ivy approaches to thank them, and Arsel warmly expresses his relief that she is uninjured. When Ivy asks to sit, Ruska cuts Arsel off with a quick and awkward refusal, leaving the boy momentarily stunned. Ruska makes a hasty excuse about Arsel wanting silence, suggesting they eat together another time as he waves goodbye. Proud of his supposedly polite intervention, Ruska looks for praise, but Arsel stares at him with utter, silent disbelief. Arsel stands up abruptly, his voice dripping with annoyance as he tells Ruska he is completely and utterly useless. A loud thud echoes as Arsel storms off, leaving a confused Ruska wondering why his favor was so poorly received. Deciding to avoid the cafeteria stress, Ivy grabs a sandwich and resolves to eat in the quiet, peaceful outdoors. She heads toward the forest, remembering a beautiful garden she saw from her room, and deciding to find it. Entering the woods, Ivy is greeted by a sweet scent of flowers and magical, shimmering lights among the trees. Her eyes sparkle with excitement as she realizes the palace garden must be just beyond the dense, sunlit forest. Ivy checks the clock tower, confident she has enough time to explore before the evening curfew finally begins. She giggles to herself, feeling a bit mischievous as she decides to take a quick, secret look at the garden. With a quiet, soft rustle, Ivy begins to crawl through the thick undergrowth, moving slowly toward her hidden destination. Her small frame disappears into the bushes as she navigates the brush, determined to reach the beautiful palace grounds. Ivy crawls out of the dense bushes with a long, tired sigh. Looking around with wide eyes, she wonders exactly where her secret exploration has led her. A sun-drenched, tranquil graveyard hidden within the forest is revealed, shimmering with magical lights and flowers. Ivy realizes with a nervous sweat that the Academy guidebook never mentioned a cemetery in the forest. Identifying the sweet scent from the graveside flower beds, she decides to retreat before getting caught. She pauses, noting that the tombstones look terribly neglected and haven't been cleaned in a long time. Shocked by her own impulsive actions, Ivy gasps as she realizes she has already started tidying them. Flashback reveals Ivy's ingrained habit of cleaning classrooms back in prep school to help pay her tuition. Satisfied with her work, she gathers her things and decides it is finally time to head back. A sudden, heavy presence nearby causes the blonde girl to freeze in place with a startled look. Rhythmic, heavy footsteps echo through the forest as someone approaches the secluded clearing along the dirt path. A figure notices the freshly cleaned area, questioning if an intruder has entered the private sanctuary. The man steps forward with purpose, his tall black boots crunching loudly against the dirt and leaves. Emperor Cloyce is revealed, his expression calm yet sharp as he gazes into the sunlit, quiet clearing. He spots a small figure resting near the headstone and stares in silent, motionless surprise. Cloyce observes Ivy, who has fallen fast asleep while holding a delicate, handmade wreath of flowers. The small girl rests peacefully, completely unaware that the emperor is standing right before her. At the palace under a full moon, a purple-haired girl asks for clarification regarding the emperor's intent. In a flashback, Emperor Cloyce demands to know why his family is barred from the imperial tombs. The council explains their lack of consecration, but Cloyce dismisses their bureaucratic nonsense with cold disdain. When they call his wife an outsider, the emperor's eyes flare with an icy and dangerous fury. Slamming his hand on the table, he declares that their cruelty has given him a perfect idea. Cloyce storms out of the meeting, deciding he will find his own way to honor his family. He vows to keep his beloved wife and daughter by his side forever instead of away. He declares they will be buried within the palace forest, leaving the courtiers gasping in utter horror. A loud clang echoes as Cloyce draws his sword to silence the officials' protests about history. With a sharp demand for silence, he stares down the terrified men with his unsheathed blade. He warns that any further raised voices will be considered an act of defiance against his command. Back in the present, Cloyce arrives at the graves, expecting to find them buried in fallen leaves. He plans to clean the headstones himself, but stops as he notices something unexpected nearby. He is stunned to find a child sleeping by the grave he had personally tended for years. Looking closer, he sees the small girl clutching a vibrant wreath of purple and pink flowers. The emperor stares down at the sleeping child, his face a mask of confusion and quiet wonder. He wonders what a little kid is doing here, but Ivy wakes up in a sudden panic. Gasping, Ivy remembers the curfew and scrambles to her feet, terrified of being late for school. She frantically asks the man for the time, fearing she has slept through her evening deadline. Cloyce informs her it is 6 o'clock, and Ivy exhales a massive, trembling sigh of relief. Curious, Ivy asks the tall man who he is, innocently addressing the emperor as Mr. Chloe realizes with a hint of amusement that she has no idea who he truly is. Ivy assumes he must be a professor at the academy, looking up at him with expectant curiosity. He introduces himself as Cyan Lowen, and Ivy's eyes sparkle with excitement at the mysterious name. Ivy beams a radiant, happy smile toward him, her blonde hair glowing beautifully in the late sunlight. Cloyce is struck by a sudden, vivid memory of his wife, Chloe, speaking of their future. In the memory, Chloe describes a child with hair like hers and eyes just like his. She laughs softly, telling Cloyce she would rather their child resemble him more than herself. Cloyce admires her red hair, calling it the most beautiful color he has ever seen. Chloe predicts a beautiful daughter with blonde hair and green eyes, a dream that never came true. A somber Cloyce reflects on the child he buried with his own hands alongside his wife, Lillian. Ivy blinks in confusion, wondering why the man has suddenly become so quiet and lost in thought. Cloyce regains his stern composure, asking why she came to this place and if she knows it. Ivy shyly explains she was drawn to the clearing by the sweet, alluring scent of flowers. The small blonde girl asks if she has intruded on a place where she isn't supposed to be. Cyan looks down at her, noting that wandering off alone is not always a safe or wise idea. A look of surprise crosses Ivy's face as the man gently reaches out to pluck a leaf from her hair. Brushing off her nerves, Ivy beams and thanks him, promising to remember his kind advice as she prepares to leave. A close-up of the young girl's bright green eyes reveals her heart is thumping with a sudden, excited rhythm. Standing in the sunlit clearing, Ivy gasps in shock as she realizes the time and fears missing her curfew. Cyan calmly offers to walk the young student back to the academy to ensure she returns safely. Bowing deeply, Ivy politely declines his help, insisting she can make it back alone the same way she arrived. Much to Cyan's disbelief, the blonde girl begins to crawl back through the thick bushes instead of using the path. Pausing to wave, Ivy brightly tells him to remember her name before disappearing back into the forest. Cyan watches her leave with a soft, contemplative expression, clearly moved by the girl's spirited and cheerful nature. The scene shifts as the man stands alone in the quiet cemetery, his thoughts lingering on the child he just met. Gazing at the graves, Cyan reflects on how he remains deeply vulnerable when encountering children around that age. Kneeling before the tombstone, he somberly thinks that his late daughter, Ivy, would have been that age as well. Turning away, he spots a small object left behind on the grass and wonders what it could be. Cyan reaches down and picks up a dirty, crumpled piece of fabric that the blonde girl must have dropped. Panting heavily, Ivy arrives at the dormitory just in time, receiving a gentle warning from a stern staff member. Leaning against the wooden railing, Ivy exhales a long sigh of relief that she avoided being scolded for her lateness. A sudden, sharp realization causes the young girl to freeze as she searches her clothes for something important. Panic sets in as Ivy frantically rummages through her bag and pockets, desperately trying to find her missing item. Realizing her precious handkerchief is gone, the blonde girl begins to cry, overwhelmed by the loss. Her mood shifts to hopeful as she imagines seeing Professor Cyan again when she goes to retrieve it. Determined, Ivy enters a room, planning to ask a staff member where to find the professor's office tomorrow. Stepping inside, her eyes widen in shock at the sight of several noble girls gathered around a white-haired student. Ivy stands frozen at the threshold, bewildered by the unexpected crowd of students occupying the room. A girl with dark hair identifies Ivy as the commoner from the orphanage who recently gained admission. Two girls look down on Ivy with disdain, mocking her wrinkled clothes and questioning the academy's acceptance of commoners. Feeling self-conscious, Ivy worries that her clothes were damaged during her crawl through the forest undergrowth. The small girl looks on in silent awe at the elegant and poised white-haired girl standing before her. A close-up reveals the white-haired girl's cold violet eyes as she stands amidst the flurry of attention. The noble girls claim a girl of Irene's rank deserves a better roommate, but Irene sharply tells them to stop. Irene steps forward to confront Ivy, looking down at the smaller girl with a stern and unreadable expression.
Without hesitation, the white-haired girl insults Ivy, bluntly calling her pathetic in front of the others.
Irene continues her cruel critique, stating that everything about Ivy's appearance is a mess from her hair to her skin. She asks Ivy a wounding question, wondering if the orphanage where she grew up routinely starved its children. The white-haired girl repeats her harsh assessment, emphasizing how much of a disaster Ivy's appearance seems to be. Looking Ivy directly in the eye, Irene demands to know if she was mistreated at her former poorhouse. Snapping out of her shock, Ivy shouts a defiant denial, surprising the noble girls with her sudden outburst. Clenching her fists, Ivy declares that while she can tolerate insults to herself, she will not allow them to insult the director. With fire in her eyes, she passionately defends the director as the kindest and most wonderful person in the world. An icy silence falls over the ornate room as the other students stare at the commoner's bold defiance. The noble girls react with fury, claiming that Ivy's lack of manners proves that commoners are beyond help. Looming over Ivy, they demand that she apologize to Lady Irene immediately for her loud and disrespectful behavior. Irene raises a hand to silence her followers, signaling that she will handle the situation herself. The white-haired girl stares down Ivy with a sharp, piercing gaze, leaving the atmosphere thick with tension. Suddenly dropping the subject, the noble girls offer to escort Irene to the cafeteria instead. They walk away, chatting about the academy's massive size and the many cafeterias available to them. As the group departs, a brown-haired girl rudely bumps into Ivy, leaving the blonde girl wincing in pain. Ivy is left alone in the room, the sharp clicking of heels fading as she reflects on the hostile encounter. Irene stands with a stern, unreadable expression, her violet eyes reflecting a cold and distant composure. Ivy blinks her wide green eyes in silent observation, processing the intense encounter from the night before. The morning sun shines on the academy clock tower as a loud bell tolls, signaling a new day. Beaming with joy, Ivy admires her reflection in the full-length mirror, thrilled to be wearing the academy uniform. Peeking through the doorway, the blonde girl realizes that her roommate, Lady Irene, has not yet woken up. Ivy reflects on the white-haired girl's harsh words, her expression softening with a hint of lingering curiosity. She recalls the encounter and decides that despite her cold exterior, Irene might not be a truly bad person. Clenching her hand over her heart, Ivy determines to check on her roommate and apologize for raising her voice. A sudden, sharp series of knocks at the door causes Ivy to jump in surprise, her eyes going wide. Opening the door, Ivy finds herself face-to-face with two noble students who were clearly looking for someone else. The peach-haired girl and her companion look down at Ivy with visible annoyance, asking why she is loitering. Sweating nervously, Ivy attempts to explain herself, but the noble girls remain unconvinced by her simple, honest truth. They haughtily inform Ivy that Lady Irene is far above her station and not someone she should be addressing. Commanding the commoner to get lost, the noble girls claim they will be the ones attending to Irene. A quick click sounds as the door shuts, leaving the small blonde girl standing alone and bewildered in the hallway. Ivy sighs quietly, realizing that the elegant white-haired girl already has plenty of friends to keep her company. Looking slightly dejected, the young girl wonders if she truly has a place among these high-ranking noble students. Outside, the noble pair gossips about the unfairness of random dorm assignments, placing a commoner with someone like Irene. Their conversation is interrupted by the sound of the door opening, and they turn with expectant, bright smiles. Irene steps into the hallway with a calm gaze, prompting the two girls to greet her with enthusiastic energy. The white-haired girl politely asks her followers if they found it difficult to prepare for their very first day. The peach-haired girl suggests that Irene should follow the lead of other nobles and use her roommate as a maid. Irene listens silently as they proudly recount how they scolded and chased the commoner girl away from the room. The ash-brown-haired student adds that Ivy clearly didn't know her proper place and needed to be put in it. Looking down with shadowed eyes, Irene darkly thinks that she would finish them if she hadn't promised her sister. Noticing her strange, low muttering, the noble girl asks Irene what she just said with a confused and curious look. Turning her back on them, Irene dismisses the topic and tells the girls to head down to the main hall. The two followers are left shivering in a cold sweat, worried they might have somehow offended the high-ranking noble. The scene shifts to the academy exterior as roll call begins for the various students gathered for their orientation. Ivy looks on as a staff member announces that the students will now begin their tour of the Imperial Palace. Crowds of students in uniform walk through the courtyard, their voices filling the air with excited and nervous chatter. As Ivy walks alone, she catches snippets of conversation from other students who are anxious about the day ahead. Hearing herself mentioned as the girl from the rumors, Ivy stops and looks back with a look of surprise. Standing amidst the busy crowd, the blonde girl feels a heavy and uncomfortable atmosphere settling over the academy courtyard. A girl with brown pigtails and purple eyes suddenly appears, introducing herself as Lamora Yisel with a friendly smile. Leaning in with an approachable and cheerful demeanor, Lamora asks if she can join Ivy for the palace tour. Ivy introduces herself happily, though Lamora already knows she is the commoner student who came from the poorhouse. To Ivy's immense relief, Lamora reveals that she also comes from a commoner background and understands her struggles perfectly. Ivy is struck with awe as Lamora sparkles with pride, happy to have finally found someone like herself. Ivy expresses her deep gratitude that Lamora approached her, causing the other girl to react with a funny, startled expression. As they walk together, Lamora mentions there is one specific thing she has been dying to ask the blonde girl. With a curious look, Lamora asks if Ivy was actually secretly adopted into a grand and powerful noble family. She wonders aloud if Ivy might even be the illegitimate child of someone very high up in the empire. Lamora tells Ivy not to play innocent, claiming that she already knows everything about the blonde girl's mysterious background. Leaning in closer, the purple-eyed girl asks for the secret of how Ivy managed to pull off such a feat. Ivy frantically denies the claims, explaining she has never been to the capital or even seen the emperor's face. Lamora remains skeptical, stating that based on what she knows, there was definitely something more to the story. A loud cheer echoes as a crowd gathers around two boys, Arsel and Luska, who have just arrived nearby. Lamora notes how popular the two handsome students are, wondering if their looks are the reason for the chaos. Lamora reveals that Arsel and Luska are the candidates everyone expects to be adopted as the emperor's sons. Arsel is a genius who frequently meets the emperor, while Luska is a powerhouse future knight. Gossip suggests whichever boy becomes prince will marry Lady Terrans, prompting students to swarm the popular pair. Lamora claims to have spoken with the duo before, assuring Ivy that they are actually decent people. The pigtailed-haired girl is stunned when Ivy points out that the famous boys are approaching them now. Arsel walks toward them with a stoic gaze, causing Lamora to freeze up in a sudden panic. Flustered, Lamora wonders why Ivy spoke to him so casually, while she nervously attempts a polite greeting. Ivy warmly compliments Arsel on his uniform, and the black-haired boy surprises Lamora by politely returning the praise. With a friendly wave, Ivy promises to greet him properly next time, as a quick tuk-tuk sounds. Lamora frantically begs Ivy to introduce her to the high-ranking noble, her eyes sparkling with desperate hope. Ivy agrees to introduce her new friend to Lord Arcel, though the black-haired boy remains distant. As Ivy begins the introduction, Arcel cuts her off, stating that he is simply too exhausted for socializing. The black-haired boy turns and departs for the gallery, leaving the two girls standing alone in the courtyard.
Ivy watches him go, thoughtfully noting that the popular Lord Arcel truly did seem quite worn out.
Lamora puts on a brave face, insisting it is fine since they will have plenty of future chances. The blonde girl suggests returning to the tour guide, while Lamora suddenly apologizes for needing to leave. Lamora explains she must rejoin her other friends, her purple eyes reflecting a hint of secret planning. Waving goodbye, Lamora runs off with a quick "tot" sound, while Ivy watches her departure with confusion. The pigtailed-haired girl returns to her group, where her friends demand to know what took her so long. They eagerly ask if the rumors about the Emperor personally choosing Ivy are true, leaving Lamora feeling pressured. Lamora backtracks, admitting that the information she gathered regarding Ivy's connection to the Emperor was actually quite vague. Her companions react with utter shock and disbelief, their faces pale as they process this unexpected uncertainty. They angrily confront Lamora for spreading rumors she cannot verify, causing the purple-eyed girl to sweat nervously. Defending herself, Lamora points out how comfortably Ivy was able to greet the prestigious Lord Arcel earlier. She argues that a simple commoner wouldn't be acquainted with Arcel unless there was some truth to the rumors. Convinced by this logic, the noble girls gossip excitedly, while Lamora remains troubled by her own web of lies. One of the girls apologizes for doubting Lamora, completely won over by her latest suggestive observation. Lamora forcedly laughs, maintaining her facade while internally panicking about the consequences of her fabricated stories. She wonders how she can possibly find a definitive answer to the mystery surrounding Ivy's background. A determined glint appears in Lamora's purple eyes as she resolves to uncover the truth at any cost. The tour reaches the Imperial Palace's main hall, described as the most magnificent complex on the entire continent. The students are awestruck by the palace's grandeur, whispering in amazement as they step inside the historic halls. Ivy pauses as she notices strange marks on the walls, her curiosity piqued by the palace's unexpected flaws. The students notice dark, scattered stains on the stone walls, wondering why such a grand place is damaged. The tour guide explains that these marks are remnants left behind from the brutal War of Succession. A curious student asks why the emperor hasn't repaired the palace when the rest of the capital is restored. The guide reveals that the emperor prioritized fixing the people's homes and public facilities over his own comfort. Hearing the guide's explanation, Ivy is struck by a sense of familiarity, her expression softening with sudden realization. She recalls the director mentioning how the emperor's funds provided plenty of food for the orphanage children. Ivy realizes that her home would have been the last to receive help without the emperor's selfless priority. Peeking through the lush white flowers, Ivy spots a figure in the distance and wonders who they are. Her face lights up with pure joy as she recognizes a familiar blonde man through the palace windows. High above, a heated argument breaks out among palace officials regarding noble taxes and potential backlash.
Cyan listens to the bickering men with growing annoyance, his blonde hair gleaming under the ornate chandelier.
Fed up with the noise, Cyan stands and scolds the officials for their daily, unproductive shouting matches. He demands they learn how to hold a proper discussion, leaving the room silent as the officials cower.
Announcing a brief recess, Cyan walks away with an air of cold authority, needing a moment of peace.
From the gardens below, Ivy waves her arms and shouts for Professor Cyan, catching his immediate attention. Ivy cups her hands to her face, greeting the surprised blonde man with an enthusiastic "Hi!" through the window.
The little girl beams with a wide, radiant smile, thrilled to have found her friend in the massive palace.
Sion gazes down at her, suddenly remembering that today was the scheduled tour for the Academy's new students.
Observers worry that the small, energetic Ivy might struggle to keep pace with the other students during the tour.
Standing by a large window, the blonde man gazes out as a thought trails off in his mind. Sparkling with excitement, Ivy looks up with a bright smile, her green eyes filled with pure wonder and joy. The blonde man gently holds Ivy's hand, leading the happy girl as they walk through the palace grounds together.
A sudden, sharp tick sounds as the blonde man's hand is shown, revealing a detailed crest tattooed on his skin. With a soft, gentle expression, the blonde man waves his hand as blue flowers frame his regal and calm presence. During a formal meeting, a concerned official asks the blonde man what he is doing as he stares at the wall.
Startled officials react with shock as the blonde man points out an insect on the table with a flustered expression.
A stern official demands thorough palace maintenance to eliminate insects, leaving the maid trembling as she apologizes in confusion.
Returning to the meeting, the officials watch the emperor as he stands by the window, questioning his strange behavior.
Sitting back at the head of the long table, the emperor calls for the formal discussion to finally resume. The council members discuss implementing tax changes in stages to avoid backlash from the nobility and protect the farmers. The blonde emperor feels embarrassed, realizing he made an awkward excuse and a rare mistake in front of his subordinates. A sudden, loud look of surprise crosses the emperor's face, causing the official beside him to jump in confusion. Relieved that the official accepted his method, the emperor offers a polite thanks, while the room remains somewhat tense. The tour guide calls for the students to gather as they enter a magnificent, gold-trimmed hall within the palace. Standing on the red-carpeted stairs, the guide explains that this central hall houses the emperor's office and banquet hall. An imperial guard notices the group of young students and asks if they are visiting from the Gifted Academy. Two friendly knights greet the promising students, considering it a stroke of luck to run into the Academy's brightest. One knight happily pats his nephew's head, thrilled to see him while passing through the hall on duty. Ivy is impressed by the cool armor of the guards, while other students mention having their own palace connections. Looking thoughtful, Ivy wonders if having connections makes academy life more enjoyable for the other students. Lamora and her friends watch Ivy from a distance, their expressions filled with a mix of curiosity and judgment. Unimpressed by the display, Lamora scoffs at the knights, thinking it is unnecessary to wear full armor inside the palace. Biting her finger, Lamora feels a wave of jealousy and wishes that she also possessed powerful connections at the palace. A friend nudges Lamora, asking if she is ready to go through with the plan they discussed earlier. The grand chandelier hangs above, as the students question what Lamora intended to confirm regarding the girl from the rumors. A realization dawns on Lamora as she stares forward, remembering the task her friends have pushed her to complete. Lamora's companion impatiently urges her to hurry, causing the purple-eyed girl to reluctantly agree to the confrontation. Walking toward Ivy, Lamora thinks that the timing is perfect to expose the blonde girl as a liar before everyone. A sharp, aggressive thought echoes through the air, declaring that Ivy is the one who will be proven a liar. Lamora approaches Ivy with a fake smile, loudly suggesting that Ivy shouldn't be jealous because she has the Emperor's backing. Ivy is stunned as Lamora claims that Ivy previously bragged about being personally handpicked by the Emperor himself. Lamora cruelly accuses Ivy of using the Emperor's name to hide her orphanage background, prompting the blonde girl's frantic denial. The tour guide tries to quiet the argument, but the Imperial Guard intervenes, demanding to know what is happening.
The knight's expression turns stern as he decides that the situation regarding the emperor's name needs to be cleared up. The Imperial Guard scolds Ivy for daring to use the emperor's name and demands an immediate truth and apology.
Ivy insists she never lied, while Lamora secretly rejoices, thinking the situation is unfolding even better than she planned.
A sudden, sharp look of confusion crosses the knight's face as he turns his head toward an approaching student. The knight freezes in terror as he recognizes the influential boy who has just stepped forward to intervene.
Arcel arrives and confirms that Ivy was indeed handpicked by the emperor, shocking the crowd with his high status. Arcel explains that the emperor chose Ivy because she was nearly rejected due to status despite being top of her class. Challenging the knight, Arcel reveals his father heard this directly from the emperor, leaving the guard trembling in fear. Terrified of the misunderstanding, the knight frantically apologizes to Ivy while his companion watches with a worried expression. The knight makes a quick escape as students whisper in shock that Ivy and Arcel were both top students. Lamora is left speechless and confused, realizing that her malicious attempts to expose Ivy have completely backfired. A sudden, sharp gasp escapes Lamora as Arcel turns his cold gaze toward her and calls her by name. Arcel confronts Lamora, pointing out that Ivy never spread any rumors and didn't even know about the emperor's involvement. Arcel sternly asks Lamora why she went out of her way to cause a public misunderstanding involving someone innocent. Lamora trembles in a cold sweat, her face pale as she faces the overwhelming pressure of Arcel's disappointment. Lamora stutters nervously, her purple eyes wide as she struggles to find an excuse for her lies. Annoyed by her friend's sudden abandonment, Lamora sweats with rage, realizing they were only egging her on earlier. Maintaining her act, Lamora tearfully claims she made a mistake and never intended for things to escalate so poorly. Arcel stares down at the group with a cold, piercing gaze, his expression unreadable as he observes the drama. Arcel sternly warns Lamora to think more carefully before acting, leaving the girl flushed with shame and embarrassment. A heavy silence falls over the hall as Lamora stands humiliated, her head bowed while Arcel walks away. Walking away, Arcel reflects on the situation, slightly annoyed that he ended up helping Ivy once again. Arcel glances back toward the blonde girl, wondering if she will seek him out to offer another thank you. Confusion crosses Arcel's face as he spots Ivy sparkling with an overwhelmingly joyful and radiant expression in the distance. Ivy is swept up in a wave of pure excitement, thrilled to confirm the emperor personally chose her. Flooded with relief, Ivy realizes she is safe from being expelled for her previous comments about the imperial family. From the shadows of the hallway, Arcel watches silently as Ivy blissfully walks away with her classmates. A sharp, tense sound echoes as Lamora clenches her fist, her frustration boiling over from the recent public humiliation. Lamora fumes internally, blaming Ivy for her embarrassment and resenting the girl for having Arcel's unexpected protection. Lamora's face twists with a dark, resentful look as she turns away, her mind clouded with growing animosity. Her fickle companions approach Lamora, asking if she is all right after the harsh scolding from the prestigious Lord Arcel. The girls flip their stance, claiming Lamora was right all along, though Lamora is unimpressed by their shallow loyalty. Gossip continues as the pink-haired girl wonders why Arcel took Ivy's side, suspecting a secret closeness between them. The girls cruelly mock Ivy's orphan status, while Lamora listens with a stunned expression at the escalating rumors. A sinister, knowing smile creeps across Lamora's face as she listens to the girls' petty and malicious chatter. Bathed in the palace's light, the small group of noble girls continues their hushed, judgmental discussion about the commoner. Arsel is comically overwhelmed by the attention, wishing Ivy wouldn't look at him with such intense, crushing adoration. The tour guide leads the Academy students toward their final destination, the Imperial Palace's magnificent History Hall. Excited by the scale of the hall, Ivy wonders where to begin her exploration of the palace's rich heritage. As the day ends, the exhausted students look for a place to rest, losing interest in the historical exhibits.
Whispers of excitement fill the room as the students discuss the possibility of seeing a portrait of the emperor.
Ivy's eyes light up with anticipation, desperate to see a visual representation of the man she considers her savior. The other noble girls walk past Ivy, dismissively thinking that she is nothing more than a simple, curious child. With her green eyes shining, Ivy reflects on her deep gratitude toward the emperor for his kindness and support. Ivy's heart sinks with a sudden, dull thud as she discovers the emperor's portrait frame is completely empty. Deeply disappointed, Ivy realizes the portrait is still being painted, leaving her unable to see his true face. Trying to stay positive, Ivy decides to explore the other portraits instead of leaving the hall early. Ivy walks through the quiet, grand corridor, her footsteps echoing as she passes rows of historic paintings. Pausing before a portrait, Ivy admires a beautiful, princess-like girl holding a stuffed bunny with delicate grace. Standing alone in the vast hall, Ivy gazes up at the magnificent architecture, completely unaware of the passing time. A striking portrait of a red-haired woman in a green dress captures the light, radiating a regal and calm presence. Ivy is spellbound by the painting's beauty, while her classmates sneak out through a large door in the background. Snapping back to reality, Ivy is startled to realize she has been staring at the portrait for far too long. A wave of unease washes over Ivy as she notices the hall is silent and the other students have disappeared. Reaching for the massive double doors, Ivy's heart skips a beat as a sharp, metallic clatter sounds from the lock. Panic sets in as Ivy frantically rattles the door handles, but the heavy wood remains stubbornly and firmly shut. Ivy freezes in terror, realizing she has been accidentally locked inside the darkened and empty history hall. Outside in the sunset, Emild looks around frantically as a sharp shout echoes, questioning why the door is locked. Emild's silver hair catches the evening light as she searches the gathering crowd for her missing roommate. The tour guide addresses the group, announcing their immediate return to the dormitories for dinner. Stepping forward, Emild worriedly informs the guide that she cannot find Ivy anywhere among the departing students. Emild provides a detailed description of Ivy, emphasizing the young girl's pale blonde hair, green eyes, and small stature. The guide's face pales as she realizes the severity of the situation if a student is lost inside the palace. Tensions rise as the guide explains they cannot re-enter, just as a stern voice demands to know the cause. The Minister of State arrives, his presence imposing and serious as he confronts the panicked tour group. The Minister of State yells at the guide for losing a student within the Imperial Palace grounds. The guide offers her sincerest apologies, explaining that Ivy had been wandering alone this entire time. Shouting in disbelief, the minister is stunned that no soul knows the missing girl's current whereabouts. A guide asks if they must wait until morning, but the minister remains silent and grimly reflects. Flashback. 7 years ago, a war of succession brought deplorable and tragic events to the entire kingdom. The emperor lost everything then, leading to the enforcement of an uncompromising and strict palace curfew. A bead of sweat rolls down the minister's face as he admits they have no idea where Ivy is. The students tremble in terror as the minister declares that Ivy will undoubtedly be executed if found. The guide prays for Ivy's safety while planning to join the search as soon as dawn breaks. Today's excursion concludes abruptly. and the students are ordered to return to the dormitory at once.
Boom, boom, boom! Ivy frantically pounds on the locked doors, begging for someone to open them.
Ouch! Ivy clutches her aching hands, realizing she has been accidentally barred inside for the closing hour. Trying to stay calm, the blonde girl hopes the guide has realized she is missing by now. Shocked by a sudden noise, Ivy stares at the historical portraits that now look eerie and glowing. The portraits take on a terrifying shroud in the dark, causing the young girl to flee in fear. Tap, tap, tap. Ivy runs across the floor, desperate to reach a faint patch of moonlight. Panting and looking back, Ivy decides to sit and wait in a slightly brighter area of the hall. Flump! Ivy collapses onto the floor, resolved to stay safe by avoiding the frightening historical portraits. Ivy's green eyes go wide as her attention is suddenly captured by a nearby sight. Looking up, Ivy finds a beautiful portrait of a red-haired woman that doesn't feel frightening at all. Ivy huddles on the floor, certain that her classmates will eventually come to find and rescue her. Shivering in the vast, empty room, Ivy reflects on the cold as the night deepens. In the dormitory, a red-haired boy asks Arcel if he heard the news about Ivy being missing. Arcel is shocked to learn Ivy lost her way just before the strict palace curfew took effect. The red-haired boy explains that even the palace staff cannot set foot on the grounds tonight. Arcel listens intently as his friend notes the search will likely only resume tomorrow morning. Concerned for Ivy, Arcel realizes that they both hold special imperial passes to the palace grounds. With a look of pure determination, Arcel declares his intention to go out and find Ivy. Step, step, step. Arcel and his friend walk through the pitch-black palace corridors, feeling a bit uncertain. The red-haired boy questions their plan, worried about searching the vast palace grounds for no reason. A stern voice suddenly calls out from the darkness, demanding to know who has broken the curfew. Trembling with fear, the red-haired boy panics while Arcel advises him to stay calm and tell the truth. Arcel identifies himself and Luska Ragself, presenting their special imperial passes to the mysterious blonde man. Gulp. The boys wait nervously to see if the authoritative figure will accept their explanation. The blonde man scolds the boys, stating the passes weren't intended for breaking palace rules. Arcel freezes in shock as he recognizes the familiar and powerful voice belonging to the man. The blonde man reveals himself as the Emperor, looking down with a cold and piercing expression. Chibi versions of the boys show that the passes grant scions the privilege of an imperial audience. The Emperor warns that he will confiscate their permits if they ever break the curfew again. Luska and Arcel bow low in apology, promising it won't happen again as the Emperor watches. The Emperor sighs, telling the boys that their reflection on the mistake is enough for now. Arcel takes a risk and explains that a student has gone missing and needs immediate help. The Emperor is visibly surprised, remembering Ivy as he learns she is trapped inside the palace. The Emperor reflects on the impossibility of a random search given the palace's immense size. He notes that security magic has deactivated most of the staff, leaving few people to help. Despite the boys' pleas, the Emperor sternly orders them to return to the dormitory immediately. Arcel and Luska are stunned as the Emperor mentions summoning Serafina to find the missing child. Serafina is introduced as a legendary prodigy who never lost first place during her academy years. The green-haired woman is the most powerful living mage and the current head of the academy. Smiling softly, the green-haired woman serves the gifted academy with her immense and legendary magical talent. Arcel reflects on the danger of the Emperor using prohibited magic just to find one commoner child. A cracked crown symbolizes the potential for severe political damage if the Emperor breaks his own palace rules. Arcel watches as the Emperor orders his staff to summon Seraphina to the Mana Stone storage immediately. Seraphina looks absolutely shocked upon being summoned for such an urgent and unexpected task in the palace. Meeting the Emperor in the storage room, the green-haired mage is stunned to hear a child is missing. Seraphina stares at the Emperor in disbelief, trying to process the gravity of his sudden command. The Emperor orders Seraphina to track the missing student using magic, even risking a precious royal mana stone. Seated on his throne, the Emperor knows breaking palace rules will cause significant unrest among his judgmental courtiers. Seraphina wonders if there is a deeper, hidden reason for the Emperor's intense personal concern for Ivy. Despite the tension, Seraphina is excited to witness a massive spell cast within the palace's restricted grounds. Seraphina carefully examines the shelves, finding a mana stone that perfectly resonates with her unique magical wavelength. Holding a glowing stone, she explains to the Emperor how the palace's environment can interfere with magical flow. Seraphina accidentally mentions how Lillian's help would have been useful before panicking and covering her mouth in shock. A shadow falls over the Emperor's face, his expression turning cold and sharp at the mention of her name. The Emperor sternly warns Seraphina that her former closeness to his late wife won't excuse any lack of transparency. Shaking with nerves, Seraphina admits that Lillian possessed unusual powers that she specifically asked to keep hidden. In a memory, golden light flows as Seraphina recalls how Lillian's presence significantly boosted her magic's accuracy. Seraphina reflects on the solidity Lillian gave to her spells, confused why she only realized this truth now. Looking at a stone lion, Seraphina explains that Lillian likely hid her powers to avoid being called a witch. The green-haired mage adds that Lillian herself didn't fully understand the nature of her supportive magical abilities. Sensing the Emperor's coldness, Seraphina quickly excuses herself to prepare the tracking spell, while expressing worry for Ivy. Seraphina rushes away, immensely relieved to have escaped the awkward conversation without any further confrontation or incident. Huddled on the cold History Hall floor, Ivy shivers as the absolute silence of the room settles over her. Ivy struggles to endure the hunger and cold, telling herself that this situation is nothing compared to her past. Flashback. Ivy remembers the harsh inn where she was reminded she was just an abandoned orphan from the forest. Little Ivy is cruelly ordered by a red-haired woman to clean the manure in the stables immediately. Inn patrons remark on the girl's small size, while the harsh woman tells them to mind their own business. Ivy struggles with a heavy shovel, knowing that finishing her work is her only hope for dinner tonight. Wah! The small girl loses her balance and falls face first into the dirt, crying out in shock. Ivy returns to the inn smelling of dung, only to be mocked by the woman for her miserable state. The woman heartlessly throws a single potato on a plate onto the floor for Ivy's meager meal. Ivy reflects that while most people pity orphans, her transition to the orphanage felt like entering a true heaven. She remembers the orphanage as a place where she had set meals and wasn't forced into back-breaking labor. Back in the hall, Ivy smiles at the memory of the lucky day she met the orphanage director. A sudden, sharp gasp escapes Ivy as a mysterious, swirling magical light begins to manifest in the dark. Ivy stares in awe and confusion as the magical trail begins to illuminate the grand corridors around her. A blonde girl wonders what on earth the strange, glowing ribbons of light could possibly be. Panicked, Ivy fears the light is a ghost and wonders how far into the room it will come. Her heart races as she retreats from the terrifying and unknown magical phenomenon dancing before her. Huddled against a pillar, Ivy watches as the swirling light moves toward the historical portraits in the distance. Ivy's expression softens as she senses a strange warmth or familiarity within the glowing magical ribbons. The girl looks up with wide, shimmering green eyes as the light begins to concentrate near a specific painting. Ivy gazes at Lillian's portrait, her eyes filling with tears as she thinks she hears a gentle voice. The magical glow intensifies around the portrait, casting a peaceful light over the huddling and lonely girl. A kind voice reassures Ivy, making her feel that she is finally safe and that everything will be okay. Bathed in the warm, radiant light, Ivy looks up with a look of pure relief and nascent hope. Serafina closes her eyes and focuses her mana into the green stone, beginning the vast tracking spell. The mage's eyes snap open as she successfully links her magic to the girl's location within the palace. Serafina triumphantly points the way, informing the Emperor that Ivy is located in the History Hall. The Emperor and his men sprint through the dark palace corridors, racing to reach the lost child. Knock, knock. A voice calls for Ivy Alden, and the startled girl looks up toward the dark corridor. The door swings open as Serafina and the palace staff find Ivy, who is still shaken from the dark. Ivy apologizes for her absence, but the green-haired headmaster immediately lifts the small child into her arms. Serafina checks Ivy for a fever, worriedly explaining that her tracking spell caused the bright, sudden flash. The headmaster excitedly suggests Ivy become a mage, leaving the overwhelmed girl spinning with a dizzy expression. The staff and students are stunned by Serafina's lighthearted oopsie as she handles the intense situation. Ivy's eyes go wide as she realizes the powerful green-haired woman is actually the legendary Gifted Academy headmaster. Ivy admits she expected the headmaster to be much older, surprised by Serafina's youthful and vibrant appearance. Serafina instructs the boys to return to their dorms, promising to deal with the incident's aftermath tomorrow. As she carries Ivy, the headmaster suddenly pauses, her gaze shifting as if sensing something in the shadows. The portrait of the red-haired Lillian glows softly, remaining a silent witness to the night's unfolding drama. The blonde emperor watches from the darkness, his expression cold and detached as he listens to the departing group. Exhaling a heavy sigh, the emperor closes his eyes, burdened by the secrets and memories of the hall. Serafina holds Ivy close, her expression strained as she carefully maintains the emperor's requested secrecy regarding the rescue. Back at the dormitory, Arcel and Luska are overjoyed to see that Ivy has been safely recovered. Arcel expresses deep concern, noting how pale Ivy looks after her long and frightening night in the hall. The headmaster tells Ivy that her rescue was only possible because of the boys' brave and persistent efforts. Serafina begins to recount the search, nearly mentioning that the boys ran into His Majesty during their hunt. Ivy is confused by the slip, prompting a panicked Serafina to remember the Emperor's order to keep him out of it. Laughs nervously, quickly spinning a fake story about an imperial audience to cover her mistake. Arcel turns to Ivy with a look of intense focus, wanting to verify a specific detail about her disappearance. Arcel directly asks Ivy if someone intentionally locked her in the room, suspecting foul play by her classmates. Ivy hesitates, her expression troubled as she tries to decide whether to tell the truth about her situation. Recalling the girl's strange behavior, Ivy considers the possibility, but worries about accusing them without absolute proof. Ivy lies, claiming she was simply captivated by the portraits and made a mistake by losing track of time. Noticing Ivy's swollen hand, Serafina insists on treating the injury before the girl goes back to her room. In a comfortable lounge,
the headmaster begins to carefully bandage Ivy's injured hand while the boys watch.
Ta-da! Serafina uses a gentle magic spell to finish the bandages, leaving Ivy looking at her hand in awe.
Ivy bows deeply, expressing her sincere gratitude to the headmaster for her rescue and care. Serafina waves a cheerful goodbye as Ivy heads back to the dorms, while Arcel remains behind, looking serious. Once Ivy is gone, the headmaster and Arcel exchange a wordless, heavy look that signals their mutual suspicion.
Arcel asks if she truly believes Ivy's excuse, and Serafina sternly admits she doesn't believe it for a second.
The headmaster vows to hunt down the true culprit tomorrow, noting how easily the situation could have escalated. Finally safe in her room, Ivy cautiously opens the door, relishing the peace of her own space. Letting out a tired breath, Ivy reflects on her exhausting day while looking forward to a long-awaited sleep.
Perfect timing! Ivy discovers a tray of food waiting for her, wondering if Serafina left it as a gift.
A serene, silver-haired girl with bright purple eyes smiles gently, looking like an angel in a floral frame. The next morning, the sun rises over the Grand Academy, signaling the start of a new and eventful day. At breakfast, Luska complains about being dead tired because Arcel insisted on their late-night palace break-in. Luska huffs as Arcel calmly points out that Luska stayed up late playing after they returned. The girls who locked Ivy in whisper fearfully, worrying that the commoner might snitch on them to the staff. One girl tries to justify their actions, but they are all startled by a sudden, polite greeting. Arcel approaches the bullies with a tray, his blue eyes fixed on them with a calm but piercing gaze. The girls are flustered and quickly invite Arcel to sit, clearly intimidated by his sudden presence at their table. Arcel mentions the commotion from yesterday, while the black-haired girl offers a nervous, forced laugh in response. Arcel notes that while he wishes the matter would blow over, the headmaster's involvement makes that unlikely. The bullies recoil in shock as Arcel warns that the investigation could lead to their immediate expulsion. Arcel crosses his arms, firmly stating his intention to help in whatever way he can to find the truth. A tense silence falls over the table as Arcel waits for the guilty girls to react to his words. Placing a hand on his chest, Arcel swears on the Kalin family name to protect Ivy from harm. Arcel politely asks to join a table, while the red-haired Luska privately mocks his friend's seemingly duplicitous nature. Trembling with guilt, the pink-haired girl tearfully confesses to locking Ivy inside the restricted portrait room. The black-haired girl adds through her tears that they were manipulated into the cruel prank by Lamora. Sobbing uncontrollably, the black-haired girl continues to express her regret over the escalating situation. Arcel listens calmly as the three girls wail, claiming Lamora promised to release Ivy almost immediately. Exhaling a heavy sigh, Arcel listens to their excuses about how the plan spiraled out of control. Clasping her hands in desperation, the black-haired girl begs Arcel to keep their involvement a secret. Arcel offers a reassuring smile, reminding the girl of his previous promise to help them. His expression shifts to one of cold calculation as he notes their failure to offer Ivy a proper apology. Crackle! A sudden, shocking aura surrounds Arcel as he declares there is nothing more he can do for them. Step, step. Arcel walks away from the distraught girls, followed closely by a silent and observant Luska. Arcel confirms to Luska that his suspicions regarding the true mastermind of the incident were correct. Luska questions what Arcel intends to do now that he has identified the culprit. With a dark and determined gaze, Arcel vows to return the favor to the mastermind with equal kindness. Nearby, the brown-haired Lamora laughs mockingly with her friends, unaware of the reckoning approaching her. Lamora enjoys tea and light-hearted gossip,
appearing completely unbothered by the previous night's events. Arcel approaches Lamora's table, his presence immediately cutting through the group's laughter. Startled, Lamora looks up as Arcel requests a private moment to speak with her. Her friends whisper in surprise, wondering if the prestigious Arcel is secretly close with Lamora. Blushing with excitement, Lamora eagerly agrees and suggests they find a more private place to talk. Standing before a grand door, Lamora shyly asks Arcel what he urgently wanted to discuss. Arcel lies smoothly, claiming a staff member found something she lost and offering to lead the way. Thump, thump. Heart races as Arcel's charming smile convinces her to follow him blindly. They walk through the quiet academy corridors, with Lamora following dutifully behind the focused boy. Lamora chatters nervously about her embarrassment, wondering if Arcel has ever been so forgetful. Arcel gives a vague, chilling response as he continues to lead her deeper into the building. Shivering, Lamora pauses as she notices a sudden, inexplicable coldness in Arcel's voice. Arcel stops at a door and announces their arrival, while Lamora tries to dismiss her growing unease. Arcel opens the heavy door to the supposed staff room and invites Lamora to step inside first. Boom! The door slams shut the moment Lamora enters the dark, empty room, trapping her inside. Panicked, Lamora rattles the handle and begs Arcel to open the door, thinking it's a mistake. From the other side, Arcel's voice asks if the terrifying situation feels familiar to her. Arcel sternly advises her to confess her sins if she wishes to escape the absolute darkness. Lamora frantically denies involvement, claiming she actually tried to stop the others from locking Ivy away. Step, step. Arcel's footsteps recede as he notes her persistence in lying, even at the very end. Arcel bids her a final goodbye, ignoring Lamora's desperate screams for him to stay. Left alone in the oppressive silence, Lamora realizes with horror that no one may ever find her. Shaking with fear, Lamora faces the same lonely, dark isolation that she forced upon Ivy. Her resolve breaks as she realizes the true weight of the revenge Arcel has orchestrated against her. Bang! Lamora pounds on the door, finally screaming out her confession that she orchestrated Ivy's entrapment. A sudden, bright light spills into the room, blinding the weeping girl as the door finally opens. Lamora is stunned to see Ivy standing in the doorway, looking back at her with a steady gaze. Looking around in confusion, Lamora wonders where Arcel went and why Ivy is the one there. Ivy stands firm, silently demanding Lamora face the consequences of her cruel and calculated actions. Lamora's fear turns to rage as she accuses Ivy of acting innocent while using Arcel for vengeance. Sneering, Lamora asserts her superiority, claiming that even among commoners, Ivy is beneath her. Blinded by hate, Lamora raises her hand to strike Ivy for her perceived insolence. Snap! A strong hand catches Lamora's wrist midair as a commanding voice orders her to stop. Lamora gasps in shock as she realizes her violent outburst has been witnessed by an unexpected authority. Headmistress Serafina looms over the girl with a terrifyingly stern expression, ending the confrontation instantly. Headmistress Serafina catches Lamora mid-strike, demanding an explanation for the confession she just overheard. Trembling, the brown-haired girl realizes her earlier admissions in the darkness were witnessed by the headmistress. Ivy gazes steadily at her classmate, who is now cornered by the sudden appearance of the Academy's authority. Lamora breaks down in tears, claiming that her cruel actions were born from a moment of overwhelming jealousy. Ivy listens silently as Lamora makes excuses, insisting she only intended to play a harmless minor prank. Desperate to escape trouble, the crying girl seizes Ivy's hands and begs for forgiveness, promising never to repeat her mistake.
Turning her head away, Ivy remains silent as she processes the shallow apology from the person who trapped her. Lamora continues to sob while Ivy keeps her distance, unaffected by the girl's public display of regret. Ivy reflects on the potential danger she faced, knowing that the situation could have ended much worse. Serafina observes Ivy closely, marveling at how the girl remained so stoic without shedding a single tear. Looking at Ivy's calm face, the headmistress notes that most children would have been terrified and calling for their parents. Ivy stands firm, echoing the headmistress's lesson that doing nothing despite knowing better is not a simple mistake. With a cold and resolute gaze, Ivy declares that she refuses to forgive Lamora for her calculated cruelty. Clap! Serafina brings her hands together, signaling that the time for discussion has ended and judgment has begun. As Lamora shivers in fear, Serafina prepares to deliver a punishment that matches the severity of the girl's actions. The headmistress decrees that Lamora must offer a sincere daily apology to Ivy until she is truly forgiven. While Serafina smiles pleasantly, Lamora is left reeling in shock at the prospect of such a humiliating daily task. The headmistress brooks no argument, warning that any refusal will only result in an even more severe punishment. Lamora trembles under the heavy gaze, but she suddenly turns and bolts from the room in a blind panic. Serafina and Ivy watch her flee, surprised that Lamora would choose flight over facing the consequences of her actions. From the doorway, Arsel notes Ivy's request for secrecy, protecting her classmates from the public scandal of their behavior. Ivy reaffirms her decision to Arsel, preferring to handle the matter quietly rather than causing a scene. Bathed in a soft glow of flowers, Ivy appears calm and composed after the intense confrontation has finally concluded. At breakfast, the other students whisper and watch Ivy curiously, sensing that something significant happened at the palace. Ivy blushes under the uncomfortable weight of the stairs, wishing the gossip about the palace chaos would subside. Feeling overwhelmed, the blonde girl decides to gather her things and retreat to a more private corner. As she reaches for the food tray, a pair of hands moves quickly to intercept her. Ivy is startled to see Lamora standing there, still looking tense as they reach for the same basket. Lamora huffs and turns away without a word, taking a sandwich and leaving Ivy standing in confusion. Ivy watches the girl walk away, noting her continued defiance despite the headmistress's stern orders for an apology. Taking a deep breath, Ivy decides to give Lamora more time, recalling how long apologies took back at the shelter. Just as she sits down to eat, a polite voice interrupts her solitude, asking for permission to join her. Ivy looks up in surprise to find the elegant silver-haired girl standing before her with a gentle smile. The blonde girl's eyes widen in amazement as she recognizes the refined student approaching her quiet table. Introducing herself simply as Irene, the silver-haired girl offers a warm greeting that immediately puts Ivy at ease. Irene's presence is like a breath of fresh air, cutting through the awkward tension of the cafeteria. Irene points out that as roommates, they should spend more time getting to know each other. Startled and excited, Ivy quickly denies any discomfort, her face flushing as she welcomes the unexpected company. Ivy apologizes for her sudden outburst, her excitement over speaking with Irene making her lose her usual composure. A look of pure joy crosses Ivy's face as Irene smiles back, the two girls finally making a real connection. Irene watches Ivy eat with a kind expression, the awkward silence between them replaced by a newfound warmth. In a soft, heart-filled aura, Irene enjoys the simple moment of companionship with her golden-haired roommate. The scene shifts back to the bustling day of academy admission, with the grand school architecture gleaming in the sun. Other students chatter about Lady Irene and Lady Israella, assuming they were paired because of their high social status. Entering her new dormitory, Irene admires the luxurious room, finding it worthy of the prestigious Imperial Academy. Opening the door to their shared quarters, the silver-haired girl wonders if they will have a view of the garden. Irene is instantly flustered and shocked as she gets her first look at Ivy's surprisingly small frame and outfit. Narration explains that in Irene's southern birthplace, the people were known for their exceptionally large and sturdy statures. Comparing citizens, it is clear that southern folk like Irene are considerably taller than those from other regions. Standing tall between her classmates, Irene looks remarkably mature, earning the admiration of the shorter girls around her. Southerners are known for doting excessively on small children, as seen by this family adoring a new baby. Young Irene was spoiled by her family until a loud voice from the manor accused her of violence. Irene's sister asks why she attacked a boy, while their father clutches his head in utter distress. While her father scolds her, Irene's sister suddenly pivots to fury, enraged that the boy dared touch her sister. The father is stunned as the silver-haired sister stands, her anger reaching a boiling point over the insult. The pair whispers about ensuring the boy can never show his face again, leaving young Irene feeling quite nervous. A thumbs up clicks into place as the father and sister decide to handle the matter personally. Years later, the father notes Irene's increasing trouble and accidents, while the silver-haired girl remains silently stoic. Declaring she needs a new environment, the father hands Irene a document after a long family discussion. Boom! Irene's heart drops as she stares in horror at an official acceptance letter to the Imperial Academy. Her sister reveals she applied on Irene's behalf, prompting the younger girl to shout in betrayal and shock. Softening her tone, the sister explains that despite her high status, Irene desperately needs to find real friends. Irene quickly deduces the ulterior motive is building a political network within the capital, which her sister acknowledges. The sister laughs, noting that friends and connections are the same, while Irene cynically calculates the potential profit. Irene reflects on her family duties, knowing she must finally start acting as a proper member of the Terrans. Her father emphasizes this is the perfect chance to clear the annoying rumors linking her to the crown prince. Annoyed, Irene recalls how one party sparked princess rumors, a role she finds far too stifling and restrictive. Flashback. Irene first encounters Ivy in their shared room, while other students mock the blonde girl's commoner rags. As the girls laugh at the idea of such a low-status roommate, Irene prepares to speak when the door bursts open. Ivy stands framed by flowers, her golden hair and wide eyes making her look like a tiny, fragile doll. From Irene's perspective, the blonde girl is so small and precious that she seems to radiate a cute aura. Irene is momentarily speechless, surprised by just how young and delicate her new roommate appears to be. Ivy introduces herself as being from Elam City, while Irene mentally compares the tiny girl to a fluffy chick. Irene struggles to maintain her neutral, noble mask, while her inner thoughts scream about how cute Ivy truly is. Noticing Ivy's thin frame and dry hair, Irene begins to worry if the girl has suffered from past abuse. Tactlessly, Irene asks if the poorhouse starved her, causing the blonde girl to look up with startled, wide eyes. Protecting her home, Ivy shouts that the poorhouse was kind and wonderful, her sudden volume shocking everyone present. The other girls scold Ivy for her manners, but Irene realizes she accidentally insulted her roommate's cherished past. While the students demand an apology, Irene feels a deep sense of guilt, knowing she is the one at fault. Overwhelmed by the awkward tension, Irene requests to step outside for a moment to clear her head.
The students follow Irene out, leaving Ivy to wonder about the immense scale of the academy in lonely silence. Tap, tap. Irene's heels click on the floor as she walks away, regretting her words but unable to speak. Ivy went missing the very next day, leaving Irene without the chance to ever properly apologize or explain herself. Irene blames herself for her coldness, fearing her failure as her roommate means she will never truly have friends. Present day, Ivy jumps in surprise as Irene suddenly calls out to her at the quiet cafeteria table. Gulp, swallows nervously as Irene admits she has wanted to offer a sincere apology for a long time. Irene explains she was influenced by bad rumors and deeply misunderstood Ivy's situation when they first met. Bowing her head slightly, Irene offers a heartfelt apology to Lady Ivy, hoping to mend their fractured relationship. She confesses that people always pitied Ivy's background, and she deeply regrets repeating that same hurtful behavior. Irene looks down, fearing her cruelty was unforgivable, but her golden-haired roommate has a very different reaction. Radiating warmth and forgiveness, Ivy offers a bright, genuine smile that instantly melts the tension between them. Irene is visibly touched as Ivy says her name with such kindness, signaling the start of a real bond. Curious, Ivy asks how Irene knew she was missing, her earlier fear replaced by a lighthearted confusion. A staff member recalls how Irene was the first to ask about Ivy's whereabouts with frantic, visible concern. Irene looks away bashfully, admitting she was terrified that something truly terrible had happened to her new friend. Ivy giggles at Irene's flustered denial, the two girls finally sharing a moment of lighthearted and playful laughter. Ivy admits she initially thought Irene was a noble fairy tale princess, far too mature for a simple friendship. Looking at Irene's blushing face, Ivy realizes her elegant roommate has a much softer, more human side. The two roommates sit together as equals, their newfound friendship blossoming in the warm glow of the academy cafeteria. Irene begins to speak, just as a surprised voice from across the room recognizes her roommate. The red-haired Lord Luska approaches the table, noting the two empty seats, much to Irene's visible annoyance. Arcel reluctantly agrees to join the group, as Luska excitedly leads the way toward the girls' table. Arcel offers a polite greeting to Ivy, who responds with a bright and incredibly welcoming smile. Settling in, Luska asks for the silver-haired girl's name, recalling her high-status family background. Irene shoots him a freezing glare, questioning if formal introductions are even necessary for their brief encounter. The atmosphere at the table becomes incredibly tense as the group eats in an awkward, silent standoff. Whispers fill the cafeteria as other students gossip about the unusual group gathered at the central table. Ivy worries about the stares, but Irene kindly encourages her to ignore them and use her first name. Back in their room, the two girls relax on their beds while discussing the upcoming course registration period. Ivy is surprised to learn that Irene's family handled her registration, leaving the silver-haired girl with no worries. Ivy apologizes for her surprise, but Irene reassures her that she didn't have any specific classes in mind. Irene encourages Ivy to share if she finds any interesting classes, making the blonde girl beam with joy. A new morning arrives at the Imperial Academy, with birds chirping amidst the grand, sunlit architecture. Ivy struggles at her desk, feeling completely overwhelmed by the daunting pile of course registration documents. Scanning the papers, Ivy finds herself tempted by a surprisingly large variety of interesting academic subjects. She considers philosophy and ancient languages, her imagination running wild with the possibilities of her new studies. Ivy worries that focusing solely on employment-related subjects might disappoint the headmaster who helped her. Finding a balance, she decides to take 3 personal interest classes and 3 that lead to high-paying jobs. With her plan nearly complete,
she realizes there is still one very difficult decision left to make. She stares at the math registration, intimidated by the sheer number of professors for the required subject. Dong! A loud bell startles Ivy, making her jump as she realizes how much time has passed. Deciding to handle math later, she quickly gathers her things and rushes out of the room. After a long day, the staff dismisses the students, reminding them to finish their course registrations soon. Lamora eats alone, feeling bitter and pathetic as she watches other students avoid her in the cafeteria. Noticing the crowd, she decides to finish her meal quickly so she can retreat to her room. Lamora's jealousy flares as she spots Ivy sitting comfortably with the most popular and prestigious students. Ivy appears radiant and happy, enjoying her meal with her new friends while Lamora watches from afar. Lamora seethes with anger, feeling it is unfair that she suffers while Ivy enjoys such high status. She views Ivy as an upstart orphan who has stolen the social position that should have been hers. Determined to reclaim her place, Lamora decides she must find a weakness to bring Ivy Alden down. Lamora hides behind a wall, stalking Ivy as the blonde girl walks through the academy halls. She imagines exposing Ivy as a social climber who uses noble connections to. Lamora's plotting is suddenly interrupted by a sharp, pained cry echoing from a nearby corner. Ivy is cornered and knocked down by two bullies who mock her for her clumsy lack of awareness. The bullies suggest Ivy should be treated like a lowly maid, while Lamora watches. Ivy endures the insults in silence, making Lamora wonder how often the girl has faced such daily abuse. Lamora finds Ivy's refusal to report the bullying to her powerful friends to be incredibly stupid and weak. Turning away, Lamora tries to convince herself that Ivy's suffering is none of her business or concern. The bullies rifle through Ivy's bag, mocking her small stature and the simple books she carries around. A bully sneers at Ivy's glare, refusing to return the bag while continuing her verbal assault. Gritting her teeth, Lamora recalls the painful memories of her own past as an orphan being called a brat. Just as the bullies demand answers, a sharp voice calls out Ivy's name, interrupting the tense confrontation. Lamora steps out from the shadows, her presence immediately shifting the power dynamic in the hallway. With a fierce and determined expression, Lamora stands ready to confront the girls who are tormenting Ivy. Ivy looks up in shock as her former rival stands between her and the aggressive students. Lamora sternly asks the bullies if they were targeting Irene's roommate, causing them to stutter in fear. With a sharp movement, Lamora retrieves the bag and thrusts it back into Ivy's startled hands. The bullies flee in terror, while Lamora huffs in annoyance, clearly frustrated by the entire situation. Ivy's eyes fill with warmth as she offers a sincere thank you to Lamora for the unexpected rescue. Lamora tells Ivy to save her thanks, calling her pathetic for not standing up for herself. Shouting with frustration, Lamora asks why Ivy simply lets the noble students look down on her. A memory of childhood bullies throwing stones flashes through Ivy's mind as she recalls being called dirty. Lamora warns Ivy to be more careful, claiming that Ivy's poor reputation reflects badly on all commoners. Tap, tap. Lamora turns and walks away through the archway, her heels clicking against the stone floor. Ivy offers a bright, appreciative smile, touched by the unexpected concern shown by her former rival. Feeling hopeful, Ivy watches Lamora leave and feels glad that their relationship might finally be improving. She suddenly remembers the course registration deadline and looks down at the paperwork on her. Ivy considers her options, realizing she still hasn't decided which professor to choose for her math class. Scribble, scribble. With a fountain pen in hand, Ivy carefully fills out the details of her registration form. Ivy arrives at the administration desk to submit her completed course registration documents to the academy staff. Ivy sighs while walking away, lamenting that math is a required subject, while other students chat nearby. 2 other students approach the counter, ready to hand in their own forms after a long night. The gray-haired girl freezes in shock, her eyes widening as she spots a specific name on a form. The girls gossip in disbelief, stunned that any student would actually sign up for Professor Mouse's class. They describe Professor Males as a terrifyingly eccentric man whose advanced math classes are notoriously difficult. The brown-haired student dismisses the idea, assuming the applicant must have simply made a clerical mistake. A new day begins at the Grand Imperial Academy as the first session of classes finally arrives. Students walk together, discussing their philosophy assignments, while Ivy listens to their nervous chatter from a distance. Thump, thump. Ivy's heart beats with excitement as she grips her bag strap, ready for her first lesson. Radiating joy, Ivy skips through the academy grounds, drawing curious looks from the other students passing by. Chidi Ivy hums a happy tune, thrilled to be starting the day with her favorite academic subject. La la la, she skips along the balcony, imagining all the complex questions she will ask her professor. Consulting her map, Ivy realizes that East Hall 23 is located at the very edge of the grounds. Ivy finally arrives at the remote stone building, confirming she has reached the correct destination for her class. She notices the atmosphere is quite different here, looking much darker and gloomier than the main academy buildings.
Creak. Ivy steps into the dusty, silent hallway, feeling nervous as she spots large cobwebs in the corners.
Bang! Determined to learn, Ivy throws the classroom door open, declaring that her studies are the most important. Ivy stands in the doorway, startled to find the classroom completely empty and covered in layers of dust. She looks around the room filled with broken chairs and cobwebs, wondering if she entered the wrong room. Ivy's attention is drawn to the chalkboard, where a message has been left for any incoming students. The board lists Professor Malice's name and a prerequisite: solve 500 advanced math problems by the next class. Ivy's grip tightens as she realizes she has only 2 days to solve 500 difficult math problems. A fire ignites in Ivy's eyes as she mistakenly assumes this extreme workload is the Academy's normal standard. Crackle. Surrounded by a motivational aura of flames, Ivy vows to complete the massive assignment no matter what. The scene shifts back to the academy exterior under a bright, clear sky as another morning begins. Pitter-patter. A group of students runs through the courtyard, complaining about a difficult assignment from their professor. Thud. One girl accidentally slams into a tall, dark figure, clutching her head in sudden, sharp pain. She looks up in terror to see the imposing, gray-haired Professor Males staring down with a cold expression. The students scream and flee in total panic, terrified just by the sight of the legendary, stern professor. Professor Males scoffs with annoyance, noting that the students never learn how to offer a proper apology. He walks on, feeling bitter about the lack of skill and manners among the academy's current student population. Creak. He enters his classroom, stopping in surprise when he sees a lone blonde girl waiting for him. Ivy stands up and offers a bright, polite greeting to the startled Professor Mals as he approaches her. He identifies her as the brat who signed up, staring her down with an intense and icy glare. Professor Males sternly asks if she managed to finish the 500 problems he assigned as a prerequisite. Ivy looks down shyly, admitting that while she worked on the assignment, she didn't finish every single problem. She explains that she encountered a specific problem she didn't understand, looking quite discouraged and small. A smug smirk crosses the professor's face as he realizes his impossibly difficult assignment successfully weeded her out. He immediately dismisses the class, telling Ivy she is unqualified to attend since she failed to finish the assignment. The stern professor insists he is a busy man, ignoring the blonde girl's desperate requests for help.
Ivy looks up with sparkling, hopeful eyes, expressing her sincere desire to learn from him specifically. Reacting with a sudden burst of energy, Ivy presents her book, explaining her struggle to understand a specific formula from the text alone.
Professor Males examines the book, puzzled by her inability to grasp a seemingly simple step.
His eyes widen in shock as he realizes Ivy's solutions are
The professor stands frozen in disbelief, while Chibi Ivy stares up at him with a nervous expression. He questions why she struggled with one problem after solving all the preceding ones with absolute perfection. Professor Males shouts in frustration.
He commands Ivy to sit down, intending to show her exactly where she made a careless error. Grabbing a piece of chalk, he tisks at how easily she fell for a slightly twisted question.
The professor begins a private lecture.
Talk! With a sharp strike against the board.
Ivy beams with joy, her eyes shining as she praises the professor's amazing and clear explanation. Professor Males acts humble about his skill, while Ivy feels confident she can solve everything else now. A small smirk forms as he admits that she might not be a complete fool after all. Checking the time, the professor realizes they have stayed far longer than he originally intended. Ivy bows and says goodbye, promising to drop the course as he originally requested. Staring at her in surprise, Professor Males tells her to forget his previous order about dropping.
He walks away, instructing her to be prepared for the real lessons starting next time.
Quang! The heavy classroom doors slam shut, leaving a stunned but happy Ivy behind. Radiating pure happiness, Ivy celebrates the fact that the difficult professor finally accepted her as a student. The sun shines over the academy as the day of the next math class finally arrives.
Professor Males walks to his remote classroom, secretly hoping the long commute would discourage the girl.
He feels a twinge of guilt, but resolves to convince her to drop for her own sake. Stopping at the door, the professor is blinded by an unexpected and intense light from within. He is stunned to find his once dusty, neglected classroom transformed into a sparkling, clean environment.
Ivy greets him with a cheerful smile, looking proud of her handiwork in the revitalized room.
Stunned, he asks if she cleaned everything. Ivy boasts about her cleaning skills, while the professor stares at her with a speechless expression. She mentions releasing the spiders outside, leaving him impressed by her immense passion for his class. In a rare moment of affection, the professor places a gentle hand on Ivy's head. He tells her there is no need to clean anymore, acknowledging her dedication with a soft gaze. Overjoyed by the praise, Ivy cheers while the professor looks on with a hint of warmth. Tuck, tuck. The lesson begins in earnest as Professor Malice writes new complex formulas on the board. Ivy remains highly engaged, raising her hand to ask questions throughout the professor's difficult lecture. The two share a high five or enthusiastic moment as they bond over the beauty of math. Dang! The bell signals the end of class, and Ivy thanks him for the challenging homework. Professor Males watches her leave, moved by the sight of such a sincere and kind student. As she runs off, he reflects on her incredible genius and the bright future ahead of her. Clenching his fist, he vows to nurture her talent so she can surpass a spark of inspiration. With a determined look, he clenches his fist again and calls out for Serafina Rightum. He confronts a woman in the hallway, reminding her not to use his given name on campus. The green-haired woman, Serafina Rightum, looks at the stern professor with a nervous sweat drop. At the cafeteria, Irene scolds the boys for sitting with them, while Ivy watches the interaction. Surrounded by an intense aura of motivation, Ivy works tirelessly on her book while the red-haired student watches. Irene explains that Ivy is tackling Professor Malleus's infamous assignment, leaving the red-haired boy completely stunned by the rumors. Ivy pauses her work for a moment, her large green eyes filled with a quiet and focused determination.
The red-haired boy warns that the eccentric professor assigns crushing workloads that cause most students' grades to plummet. The black-haired boy notes that Malleus ignores his students, making it impossible to gain the recommendations needed for graduation. Ivy beams with joy, insisting that the professor's clear explanations actually make the difficult subject matter fun to learn. High above the table, the group sits in stunned silence as they process Ivy's shocking claim that Malleus is kind. The black-haired student stares intensely, questioning the true motive behind Ivy's desire to push through such a brutal curriculum. A realization hits him like a bolt of lightning, suspecting Ivy is strategically using the class to surpass everyone. Trembling with regret, he realizes he shouldn't have let rumors stop him from taking advantage of the same opportunity. With a sudden spark of resolve, the black-haired boy declares his intention to join Professor Malleus's class as well. The red-haired boy panics at the thought of being left behind, quickly deciding to change his registration too. Irene stares forward with a serious and unwavering expression, clearly plotting her own next move in this academic rivalry. Fearing that Ivy will grow closer to the boys than her, Irene resolves to join the difficult math class. Irene tells Ivy that she is switching because her current professor's teaching style simply doesn't suit her anymore. Chibi Ivy sparkles with excitement, thrilled at the prospect of all four friends taking the same class together. Fired up with competitive energy, the three new students vow to keep up, while Ivy happily offers to lead. Professor Malleus walks through the academy halls with a rare smile, planning to ease Ivy's workload for the day. He stops at the classroom door, surprised to see a bright light shining from within the once empty room. He pauses as he overhears the other students urging Ivy to switch to a different professor before it's too late. Bursting into the room with a furious roar, Professor Malleus demands to know who these punks are in his classroom. Ivy offers a cheerful greeting, completely unfazed by the professor's rage, while the other three students sit in terror. Glaring with an icy intensity, Malleus confronts the newcomers for trying to convince his only student to leave. Irene attempts to explain their presence, though she remains visibly nervous under the legendary professor's terrifying and stern gaze. The boys argue that the classroom's extreme distance from the main building is a serious problem for the students. Malleus defends the location, but Irene stands up abruptly, ready to unleash a list of grievances on Ivy's behalf. Irene dramatically hugs Ivy, accusing the professor of forcing the small girl to skip breakfast just to arrive on time. Pointing to Ivy's face, Irene scolds the professor for giving the tiny, cute child dark circles from too much homework. The boys add that Ivy even bruised her knee running, making Malleus feel a sudden, sharp sting of guilt. Irene demands a closer classroom to save Ivy from switching, and Malleus admits he was already planning the move. Malleus turns his attention to the three intruders, questioning if they truly intended to submit formal applications for his class. He warns them with a cold look that his advanced lessons are far more difficult than any standard curriculum. Despite the warning, Irene and the two boys stand their ground, expressing total confidence in their own academic abilities. Annoyed by their persistence, the professor decides to test them immediately rather than taking them at their word. He singles out Irene, announcing that he will provide a specific, high-level problem for her to solve on the spot. Malleus challenges the boys next, stating their admission depends entirely on solving the difficult problem he is about to set. With a commanding shout, he declares that the three students have a strict 15-minute time limit to finish the task. Ivy looks on with concern, realizing the problem is much trickier than anything she has encountered in her studies so far. 2 minutes in, the three students scribble frantically on their papers, feeling the immense pressure of the ticking clock. The black-haired boy stands up and submits his paper, shocking his peers with his incredible speed and calm demeanor. Malleus examines the sheet, impressed by the perfect calculations and recognizing the boy as the talented son of Duke Kalen. He grants the boy a pass, and the student bows politely, expressing his readiness to begin the real lessons. 8 minutes have passed, and Irene and the red-haired boy continue to struggle with the complex mathematical formulas. Suddenly, the red-haired boy shouts in triumph, startling Irene as he finishes his work just in the nick of time. Malleus looks over the boy's work with a skeptical eye, while the student waits with a nervous sweat drop. The professor asks in surprise how the boy thought to use a specific advanced formula to reach the final answer. Beaming with pride, the boy admits he just tried to fit in the only formula he had learned recently. Malleus huffs, realizing the boy got lucky, but acknowledging that even rascals can sometimes stumble upon brilliant mathematical solutions. He grants the red-haired boy a pass, prompting a celebratory cheer while the others look on with a smile. Ivy gasps in sudden alarm, realizing there are less than 5 minutes left for the final student to finish. Ivy works at her desk with intense focus, though her expression remains remarkably stoic. Watching Ivy's steady hand, Irene is deeply impressed by her friend's composure under such academic pressure. A single bead of sweat rolls down Ivy's neck, betraying the intense internal stress she actually feels. Chibi Ivy panics internally, desperately clutching her head while wondering how on earth to solve the problem. Back in the hallway, Professor Malleus sighs and reminds his colleague never to use his name on campus. Over tea, the woman asks why Malleus is suddenly so interested in the young student Ivy Alden. Malleus proudly declares his intention to become Ivy's guardian, praising her as a once-in-a-generation mathematician. When he learns she already has a guardian, Malleus erupts in a pillar of jealous, fiery rage. He demands to know who it is, shouting that he is the Empire's greatest mathematician and should be chosen. The green-haired woman pushes the frantic professor out of her office, insisting she is far too busy to help. Kung! The heavy door slams shut, cutting off Malleus' protests about how he raised her to be more respectful. Leaning against the closed door, the exhausted woman sighs in relief after finally managing to eject the eccentric professor. Sarsak, Sarsak. In a far more quiet setting, a refined hand uses a gold pen to sign an important document. A long-haired attendant bows respectfully while addressing his monarch within the pristine, sunlit halls of the palace. The blonde king reads over the paperwork with a serious expression, his royal uniform catching the light. The attendant notes the lack of bugs lately, and the king agrees that their recent measures were effective. Back in the classroom, Ivy stares at the clock with only 3 minutes left, struggling to stay calm. A memory of a past teacher flashes through her mind, reminding Ivy of a lesson on complex formulas. Young Ivy raises her hand, asking what to do when a problem seems completely incomprehensible from the start. The teacher explains that Ivy's foundation is perfect, so there shouldn't be any problem she cannot eventually solve. Adjusting her glasses, the teacher tells Ivy that true skill lies in identifying exactly which formula to apply. Ivy suggests a brute force approach, prompting her teacher to admit it is technically possible but wildly inefficient. Ivy's eyes widen with a sudden spark of inspiration as she realizes she already knows every basic formula required. Talk! With newfound resolve, she decides to try every possible combination rather than accepting defeat as time runs out. Sarsak! Ivy begins writing with insane speed, leaving the professor and her friends completely speechless. She works through the formulas one by one, crossing out failures with a singular, unwavering focus on the paper. Sweat trickles down her face as she identifies the very last formula that could possibly lead to the answer. Srick stands up abruptly, her sudden movement startling Irene and the boys as the final seconds tick away.
Malleus silently reviews her work under the shadow of the classroom clock, while Ivy waits with bated breath. Looking up with shimmering purple eyes, Ivy waits for the professor's final verdict on her chaotic but determined effort. Waha! Ivy cheers in victory while Malleus watches, secretly marveling at her supernatural ability to calculate so quickly. The professor looks at the paper one more time, his stern expression softening into one of genuine disbelief. The entire page is covered in a dense thicket of formulas, proving her incredibly inefficient but successful strategy.
Malleus realizes Ivy's success was only possible because her mind operates at an absurdly high speed compared to others.
Coom! He clears his throat and formally announces that all 4 students are permitted to attend his class. Looking drained, Malleus begs them not to bring any more students, as he cannot handle any more chaos. The group celebrates their shared success, though Ivy and Irene look slightly concerned by the professor's visible exhaustion. Dang, dang. The academy bells chime as the friends look forward to the challenging math lectures ahead. Tak! A hand slams onto the table in frustration as the reality of the workload begins to set in. Sarsak. The black-haired boy continues writing, asking the red-haired boy why he is complaining after passing the exam. The red-haired boy screams about the massive amount of homework, ignoring Irene's request for some quiet focus. He insults the black-haired boy's intelligence, causing a visible snap in the talented student's usually calm patience. Dweedle erupts as Irene keeps reading, ignoring the red-haired boy's desperate pleas for help. Suddenly, the black-haired boy stops writing and calmly announces that he has already finished the entire assignment. Ivy and the red-haired boy stare in absolute shock, unable to believe he finished such a difficult task so quickly. He credits the professor's kind teaching for his speed, but his internal monologue reveals a fierce competitive fire. Irene feels the weight of the academic rivalry, wondering why her friends are so much more intense than expected. The red-haired boy laughs off the tension and suggests they go eat, which Ivy happily agrees to. The 4 friends navigate through the busy, bustling halls of the academy as the lunch rush begins. Irene complains about the crowds while asking Ivy if she has decided what she wants to eat today. Irene notes Ivy's repetitive sandwich habit, curiously asking if there is a specific reason behind it. Ivy blushes and hesitates to answer, while Irene waits with an inquisitive look for an explanation. Ivy admits she only picks sandwiches to avoid menu confusion, just as the boys arrive with trays. Her eyes sparkle with wonder at the gourmet feast, marveling at dishes she has never seen before. Excitedly asks for the names of the meals, eager to order the same delicious-looking food. Irene encourages her to try a variety of different things to truly experience the Academy's culinary range. Chibi Irene suggests a bold solution, declaring they should simply order one of every single menu item. Chibi Ivy panics about food waste and demerits, but Irene points out the menu is very limited. Reassuring her friend, Irene gestures toward the boys, confident they can finish any leftovers without any trouble. Arsel and Ruska tremble in the background, realizing they have been designated as the group's food disposals. A mouth-watering spread of steak, sausages, and fruit soup arrives, sparkling under the bright cafeteria lights. The 4 friends gather around the table, amazed by the sheer variety of famous dishes they ordered. Ruska, Arcel, and Irene each recommend their favorite dishes, highlighting the unique flavors of the Academy's menu. Faced with a table full of incredible options, Ivy wonders which delicious meal she should taste first. Encouraged by her friend's suggestions, Ivy reaches out to begin her first gourmet meal at the Academy. Ivy takes a large bite, her expression freezing in a moment of pure, concentrated culinary shock. A sudden, intense focus takes over as Ivy begins eating with a silent, unwavering determination.
Overwhelmed by the flavor, Ivy cheers happily, declaring this the greatest meal she has ever experienced.
Irene smiles warmly, warning Ivy to eat slowly to prevent a stomachache as she devours the food. Ivy pauses her meal, casting a curious and slightly suspicious glance toward her two male companions.
Ruska is caught mid-bite, enthusiastically shoving sausages and steak into his mouth with total abandon.
Chibi Irene scolds the complaining Ruska, who cries out about the unfairness of their eating arrangement. Ruska points in shock at the silent Arcel, who has already consumed a massive pile of food. Arcel calmly wipes his mouth with a napkin, looking perfectly refined despite having finished 4 full plates. Ivy and Irene stare in absolute stunned silence at the unbelievable eating speed of their two friends. Arcel and Rushka continue their frantic eating pace, clearing their plates with inhuman efficiency and focus. A massive stack of 8 empty plates sits on the table, leaving the girls completely shell-shocked. Ruska stands to order even more food while Arcel agrees, terrifying the girls with their bottomless appetites. Ruska mentions a lunch invitation from the Duke's children, asking Arcel if he plans to attend tomorrow. Arcel stares ahead with a cold, unreadable expression, considering the social invitation with his usual stoicism. Arcel bluntly rejects the invitation, choosing to stay and eat with Ivy instead of meeting the Duke's kids. Chibi Ruska explodes in a fit of rage at the betrayal, shouting about being ditched after everything. Ruska continues his rant, complaining about how long it took for Arcel to even get comfortable with him. Pausing, Ruska looks at Arcel with a knowing smirk, claiming he finally understands why the boy is staying. He challenges Arcel to think about who Ivy reminds him of, hinting at a deep, nostalgic connection. Arcel looks genuinely confused by the sudden change in topic as Ruska mentions a creme brulee. Arcel reflects on his limited social circle, acknowledging that Ruska was his only companion until now. The scene shifts to Ivy and Irene laughing together at their table, their bond growing visibly stronger. A soft glow signals the start of a flashback, centering on a significant memory from the past. A blonde-haired girl smiles brightly in a profile shot, looking very much like a younger version of Ivy. A woman with flowing red-orange hair and green eyes smiles warmly, radiating a kind and maternal energy. Young Arcel and Ruska look up in surprise at the mysterious woman standing in a sun-drenched forest. Holding a woven basket, the woman explains she is picking apples and invites the curious boys along. The beautiful redhead smiles gently, her kind gaze capturing the attention of the two young children. A horse-drawn carriage travels through the woods as a voice discusses the crown prince's upcoming forest wedding. Inside the carriage, a man in a vest encourages the child beside him to enjoy the beautiful scenery. A 5-year-old Arcel Kieran sits stiffly in the carriage, looking remarkably serious for such a young age. Arcel's father beams with pride, praising his son's endurance as a proper member of the Kieran family. Young Arcel confirms that there have been no problems, his calm demeanor impressing his satisfied father. The man instructs Arcel to avoid fighting and continue getting along well with his young friend Ruska. Young Arcel Kieran looks ahead with a serious expression, his black hair neatly combed and his eyes focused. In a flashback, Arcel sighs as the immature Ruska runs around playing with sticks and spiders. Determined to manage his chaotic friend, the young Arcel decides he must take the lead. As the carriage rolls through the woods, Arcel prepares to ask his father a pressing question. Arcel asks Duke Kieran about the mysterious woman rumored to be marrying the crown prince. The boy nervously asks his father if the rumors that the bride-to-be is a witch are true. Duke Kieran dismisses the rumors as they arrive at their destination deep within the sun-drenched forest. His father instructs him to take a walk while preparations for the wedding ceremony get underway. Arcel steps out of the carriage as his father greets someone, apologizing for their late arrival. Arcel spots Ruska running headlong into the woods and feels a sudden surge of alarm. He calls out to his friend, but the red-haired boy enthusiastically reveals he's going to play. Ruska claims he is bored, but Arcel is skeptical about his plan to play in the forest. Arcel recalls a strict warning from his tutor never to enter the woods alone or without knights. Disregarding the danger, Ruska ignores Arcel's warning and sprints away into the dense green thicket. Arcel shouts after him about the dangers of getting lost before stopping short in shock. They come face to face with a beautiful woman with flowing red hair and a kind, mysterious smile. The woman greets them warmly, asking if they are the children she was told to expect. Arcel panics, remembering the terrifying rumors of a witch who conducts secret, dark experiments in the forest. He imagines the sinister woman using evil magic to ensnare the crown prince within her woodland hideout. Arcel fears they'll become test subjects, but the cheerful Ruska immediately agrees to go with her. Arcel tries to stop his friend, but Ruska dismisses his fears and tells him to stay behind. Ruska sprints after the red-haired woman, leaving Arcel shouting after him in total frustration. Arcel curses Ruska's stupidity, realizing his friend is being lured away by the promise of apples. He resolves to follow them, fearing Ruska will fall victim to dark magic if left alone. Arcel remembers his father's order to get along with Ruska, fueling his reluctant determination to follow. Complaining about the hassle, the black-haired boy cautiously enters the forest to track his reckless companion. He watches from behind a tree, wondering how the pair managed to get so far ahead. Arcel breaks into a run, determined not to lose sight of the woman and Ruska. He sees Ruska laughing and talking to the woman as they walk through a clearing together. Gasping for breath, Arcel realizes something is wrong as he struggles to keep up with them. Despite his speed, it feels like they are only getting further away as the forest path stretches. His foot catches on the edge of a small cliff, and he begins to stumble forward. Boom! Arcel falls down the steep embankment, startling the birds as he crashes onto the ground. Groaning in pain, Arcel clutches his bleeding leg and realizes he cannot stand or escape. The red-haired woman and Ruska peer over the edge, asking if he is all right. Looking concerned, the woman notes that the boy has sustained a serious injury to his leg. Arcel gasps in shock as the woman suddenly jumps down the cliff to reach him. He retreats in fear, convinced the witch is taking advantage of his injury to capture him. Desperate, Arcel warns her that he is the Duke's son and threatens to tell his father. He flinches as the woman reaches out, shouting for her to stay back. Arcel shields his eyes as a sudden, brilliant light begins to emanate from the woman's hands. The woman focuses her magic, surrounding Arcel's injured leg with a warm, golden healing glow. Her gentle hands touch his ankle, and the shimmering light begins to mend the broken skin. Smiling brightly, the woman announces that he is all better as the magical energy fades away. Arcel stares in disbelief at his leg, seeing that every trace of the wound has vanished. He wonders if witches possess such kindness, but he remains suspicious of her true ultimate goal. Arcel bluntly asks the woman what she wants in exchange for using her power to heal him. He remains on guard, certain she must want something from the son of a powerful duke. The red-haired woman smiles warmly, telling him he'll have to discuss his debt with her father. Talk! The boy is caught completely off guard as the woman suddenly flicks his forehead. Ivy watches in shock as the redhead woman chuckles, having just flicked the annoyed young Arcel's forehead. Surrounded by blooming roses, Lillian explains to the boys that they should always express gratitude for help. Arcel reflects on the lingering memory of the mysterious woman, realizing he never truly forgot her presence. Clang! Present-day Arcel drops his fork,
the sharp sound snapping him out of his deep, nostalgic trance. Ivy apologizes profusely for the accident, while Irene remains calm, though Arcel stays silent and deeply contemplative. Arcel stares at Ivy, struck by a sudden, haunting realization of how much she resembles the woman Lillian. Thinking Ruska might have upset him, Ivy tries to stop Arcel as he stands to fetch another fork. Arcel simply agrees when the enthusiastic Ivy offers to accompany him to the cafeteria's service area. At the buffet, Arcel hands Ivy a replacement fork, asking if she requires anything else for her meal. Ivy walks alongside Arcel, clutching her fork and beaming with happiness at their small, shared moment together. Looking up at Arcel, Ivy sincerely thanks him for his constant care, though he humbly dismisses the gesture. A soft floral glow surrounds Arcel as he gazes at the kind blonde girl, his expression uncharacteristically soft. Arcel considers Ivy's genuine curiosity, remembering how her simple questions often lead back to his own hidden past. In a vibrant flashback, the young, energetic Ruska shouts with joy as he races through a sunlit field. Lillian laughs, warning the sprinting Ruska about falling, while the young Arcel follows them at a steadier pace. Pausing in the field, young Arcel looks down as Lillian comments on the endless energy of the two boys. The black-haired boy admits they once believed the rumors and viewed Lillian as a dangerous, mystical witch. Lillian finds the accusation hilarious, teasing Arcel for being the only one cautious enough to get injured. Still laughing, the redhead woman playfully tells Arcel to be more observant as he looks on with confusion. Young Arcel reaches out to pinch Rinka's cheek, probably checking to see if his reckless friend is actually real. Lillian pulls both boys into a warm embrace, her eyes filled with a deep maternal fondness for them. The woman looks down at Arcel, predicting that he and Ruska will find great happiness in their future. She continues her warm prophecy, telling the boys that they will celebrate many joyful moments together in time. Lillian asks the boys to be good friends to another child, her gaze drifting toward a distant horizon. Ivy's voice breaks through Arcel's memory, her worried face appearing as she asks if he is all right. Arcel remains silent, prompting a flustered Ivy to apologize for her sudden question as she tries to backtrack. To Ivy's absolute shock, Arcel breaks his stoic mask and offers her a rare, gentle, and genuine smile. Ivy is left completely frozen, her eyes wide as she processes the unexpected warmth from her usually cold friend. A wave of bashful energy overtakes Ivy as she dwells on the idea of them being true, close friends. Irene calls out to them from the table, curious about what is taking the pair so long. Ruska playfully complains about Arcel hogging Ivy's time, urging them to return and finish their massive meal. Arcel stops in surprise as a sudden thought or sound catches his attention while walking back with Ivy. Ivy shouts Arcel's name with infectious cheer, her long blonde hair swaying as she races back to the table. The next morning, Ivy knocks on Irene's door. Opening the door, Ivy stops mid-sentence, her expression shifting to one of pure, wide-eyed astonishment at the scene. Ivy stares in disbelief, her vibrant green eyes capturing her total shock at Irene's sudden and dramatic makeover. Irene stands elegantly before a full-length mirror, dressed in a beautiful blue gown and holding a stylish hat. The silver-haired girl offers a polite, calm smile, her refined appearance radiating a newfound sense of noble grace. Ivy asks if there's a celebration, and Irene explains that it is the start of the Guardian's Day event. A vision of a father presenting a gift to his daughter appears, illustrating the sentimental holiday traditions. Irene mentions her guardian sent an extravagant gift, explaining that she must go outside to receive her special delivery. Irene notes she will be gone most of the day, leaving Ivy looking slightly dejected at the news. Irene explains that noble children use the day to flaunt their gifts, making the social atmosphere quite competitive. To cheer her up, Irene promises to return with delicious treats, instantly reviving Ivy's happy and excited mood. Irene bids Ivy farewell as she steps out, while Ivy waves and wishes her a very safe trip. Looking over the railing, Ivy is stunned by the enormous mountain of colorful gift boxes filling the academy lobby. Ivy watches in awe as servants bring more presents, realizing the true scale of the Guardians' Day festivities. Ivy overhears cruel gossip from other students, who mockingly suggest she won't receive any gifts at all today. A woman claps her hands to gain everyone's attention, signaling the official beginning of the gift-giving ceremony. The ceremony begins as the administrator announces that students should step forward when their guardian's gift is called. A cheerful blonde girl named Alicia raises her hand enthusiastically, claiming the first beautifully wrapped package. Alicia proudly displays her new jewel brooch, while Evie looks on, genuinely happy for her classmates' good fortune. Next, Hemart Vermeulen receives her gift, thanking the administrator with a polite smile as she steps forward. Juvia Schultz and Roel Nessler are called, their names echoing through the hall amidst a flurry of excited cheers. Watching the joy around her, the long-haired blonde Evie finds happiness in seeing her peers' radiant expressions. Another student clutches her gift tight, reflecting the warm, festive atmosphere filling the academy's grand lobby. A girl holding a large container dashes off to her room, leaving Evie watching the busy scene alone. Evie overhears bitter gossip about cheap gifts, though she personally believes any token of care is worth receiving. Resigned to having no gift, Evie decides to leave the festivities and prepare for her classes tomorrow. She stops in her tracks as the administrator suddenly calls out the name Evie Alden for everyone to hear. Evie turns back in utter disbelief, convinced there must be some mistake regarding her name being called. Confirming her presence, Evie shouts out with pure joy as she realizes she actually has a gift waiting. The administrator presents Evie with a delicate pink box, and the girl stares at it with wide, shimmering eyes. Her cheeks flush with a deep, emotional warmth as she processes the reality of receiving something so special. With trembling hands, Evie reaches out to take the beautifully wrapped package, her heart fluttering in her chest. Clutching the pink gift against a backdrop of blooming flowers, Evie feels overwhelmed by this unexpected moment of kindness. While Evie plans to open her treasure privately, a sudden voice commands her to stop right where she is. A freckled, brown-haired girl approaches Evie with a suspicious glare, making it clear she is the one being targeted. The girl demandingly holds out her hand, insisting on checking the gift Evie just received from the administrator. Evie is caught off guard, questioning the strange demand, while the other girl claims something feels distinctly wrong. The freckled girl cruelly insults Evie's background, suggesting a poorhouse resident receiving such a luxury must be a mistake. Evie flinches, stammering in defense of her gift, as the hostile girl continues to cast doubt on its origin. Whispers spread through the crowd as students begin to mock Evie, questioning if a commoner could even have a guardian. Despite Evie pointing to her name on the label, the bully insists the handwriting itself must be an error. A firm command to stop the harassment cuts through the air as a new set of footsteps approaches. The surrounding students gasp in surprise, their attention shifting to the authoritative figure stepping into the fray. A red-haired girl with striking blue eyes intervenes, defending Evie and calling out the group for their hasty condemnation. Struck by the newcomer's elegance and beauty, Evie wonders about the identity of the noble girl who stood up for her. The red-haired noble looks on with a calm but stern expression, her presence commanding immediate respect from everyone nearby. Students whisper in awe, identifying the girl as Lady Yisriela and questioning why she would assist a mere commoner.
Evie recognizes the name Yisriela, realizing this girl is a high-ranking noble, often mentioned in the same breath as Irene. The freckled bully points aggressively, refusing to back down from her claim that the gift is too luxurious for Evie. Yisriela counters that Evie could easily have a guardian, but the bully highlights the rare, expensive wrapping paper as proof. Sighing at the persistent hostility, Yisriela acknowledges that the suspicious girl won't be satisfied without some kind of proof. Yisriela addresses Evie directly, admitting her next suggestion is unpleasant, but perhaps necessary to settle the dispute. She asks if Evie is willing to open the package right here to put an end to the cruel rumors. Evie hesitates, having desperately wanted to save the beautiful wrapping paper by opening it carefully in her room. Realizing it's the only way to clear her name, Evie reluctantly begins to untie the ribbon of her precious gift. She tries to peel the paper with extreme gentleness, hoping to avoid any damage while the bully watches impatiently. The freckled girl seethes with frustration, finding Evie's slow, careful movements absolutely unbearable to witness. Losing her temper, the bully lunges forward to snatch the box, causing the startled Evie to fall with a cry. A sharp rip sounds as the beautiful paper is torn away, leaving the devastated Evie staring in complete horror. The freckled girl smirks triumphantly, convinced that the revealed contents will finally expose Evie as a fraud. Opening the plain wooden box, the bully mocks the sorry state of the contents as fitting for a commoner. Declaring the item filthy, she carelessly tosses the box back, leaving the heartbroken Evie in a state of shock. Tuck! A small, dark sphere falls from the wooden box and strikes the floor with a hollow sound. The strange, dark object bounces repeatedly across the floor tiles, rolling further away from its rightful owner. Evie sits frozen on the ground, her eyes fixed on the rolling sphere as her long blonde hair spills around her. The surrounding students mock the gift, laughing at the idea that Evie's mysterious guardian sent her nothing but a rock. The red-haired Yasriela looks on with feigned concern as the students surround the blonde-haired Evie. Harsh whispers fill the air as the crowd continues to mock the humble gift Evie received. A brown-haired girl asks the blonde Evie if she is all right amidst the persistent, cruel laughter. Yasriela watches the scene unfold, expressing her disbelief at the chaotic situation happening before her. Covering her mouth, the red-haired Yisriela struggles to hide her amusement at Evie's growing distress. A sudden chuckle sounds as Evie looks up, her face flushed with shame as the mockery intensifies. Evie remains slumped on the floor, devastated, while the surrounding students' loud laughter echoes through the hall. The dark sphere rests on the floor between Evie's feet, a silent reminder of her public humiliation. A sudden, brilliant light strikes the sphere, causing it to shimmer with an unexpected and mysterious energy. Evie sits frozen, her eyes fixed on the rolling object, as the crowd's taunting laughter continues unabated. Yisriela looks down at Evie, noting that while the gift may seem insignificant, it is actually quite special. Evie gasps in wonder, clutching the now glowing golden sphere to her chest as it pulses with light. Her green eyes widen in pure astonishment as the sphere radiates an intense and blinding golden brilliance. A bubble of confusion appears as the surrounding light intensifies, prompting a startled question about the object. Evie holds the brilliantly glowing stone, realizing with shock that it is radiating a strange, comforting warmth. The surrounding students watch in complete awe as the once dull rock continues to shine with golden light. A girl with glasses leans forward, her eyes wide as she tries to identify the mysterious, glowing object.
someone in the crowd shouts out that the object is actually a rare and powerful magic stone. A narration box explains that a magic stone is a mysterious gem that houses incredible concentrated magical power. The text describes how these stones are prized treasures, highly valued by mages and high-ranking nobles alike. Students whisper in disbelief, noting that even a tiny magic stone is worth more than a diamond ring. Evie stares at the stone in her hands, marveling at its warmth and the incredible golden glow. Excited students crowd around Evie, all clamoring for a chance to touch and see the precious magic stone. Yisriela stands in the center of the hall, her shadow looming as the students' laughter finally fades away. The group of girls looks on in curiosity, their previous mockery replaced by a sense of nervous anticipation. Yisriela offers a mocking apology, claiming the situation was simply too amusing for her to contain her laughter. She informs the blonde Evie that the stone she is holding is actually nothing more than a fake. Yisriela explains that seedier markets are currently flooded with convincing-looking rocks masquerading as rare magic stones. With a cold and calculating gaze, she declares it painfully obvious that Evie's gift is a cheap close-up on the glowing sphere. Yisriela dismisses it as a fake infused with a laughable amount of magic. The surrounding students quickly change their tune, agreeing that no. Evie looks down at the sphere, feeling heartbroken and wondering why her luck is. She is suddenly interrupted by a familiar and authoritative voice, causing her to look up with a start. Yisriela and Evie both turn toward the source of the new voice as a tense silence falls. The silver-haired Irene enters the room, her elegant presence immediately commanding the attention of everyone present. Irene stands tall with a stern expression, her purple eyes flashing with indignation as she stares down Yisriela. Yisriela smirks at the arrival of her rival, Irene Terran, noting that her flair for drama remains unchanged. Narrative boxes describe Yisriela as the flower of high society and the envy of every other young lady. A flashback shows Yisriela hosting a graceful tea party, reflecting her status as a high-ranking noble girl. She thanks her guests for attending her party, while the scene transitions back to her current confrontation. A student announces the arrival of an important guest, while Yisriela looks on with a calm, practiced smile. Irene Terran, the youngest daughter of her house, makes her grand appearance, captivating the entire social gathering. Yisriela asks her companions to step aside, maintaining her elegant posture as she prepares to greet Irene. She welcomes Lady Irene and presents a gift, introducing herself as the host of the elite garden party. Yisriela notes that the table is already overflowing with presents, prompting her to take a specific, haughty action. She dismissively clears away the other offerings, calling them subpar gifts while sweeping them off the table. Irene watches in shock as the presents are tossed aside, as a cold sweat breaking out on her face. Yisriela reveals her special gift, a pair of exquisite red shoes adorned with large, elegant pink bows. She boasts that only 3 such pairs exist in the Empire, making them an incredibly rare and valuable treasure. While Yisriela tells Irene not to feel burdened, Irene realizes why the expensive shoes look so incredibly familiar. Crossing her arms, the silver-haired Irene observes that the gift's design is suspiciously similar to a pair she purchased months ago. Irene informs the stunned, red-haired Yisriela that the style of the shoes is already considered outdated in the South. Stuttering in disbelief, Yisriela tries to defend her gift as the sound of muffled snickering begins to fill the air. Students whisper amongst themselves, noting how cool Lady Irene is for effortlessly treating the high and mighty Yisriela with such casual disdain. Turning away with a heavily flushed face, Yisriela seethes in silence after being publicly humiliated by her rival's sharp observations. Narrative text describes how Yisriela feels crushed by Irene's superior gaze and that aloof attitude that displays absolutely no weakness. Close up on the silver-haired Irene, whose purple eyes remain fixed and cold as she maintains her regal, unwavering posture. Yisriela thinks bitterly about how she dislikes everything about Irene, especially her tendency to appear at the most inconvenient moments. Attempting to save face, Yisriela approaches Irene and suggests there has been a slight misunderstanding regarding the current chaotic situation. Irene demands a full explanation. Yisriela claims she was merely restoring order after Evie paraded a fake stone as real. Condescendingly, Yisriela suggests that Irene's short time in the capital might make her unaware of the recent flood of counterfeits. Yisriela sashays through the hall, complaining that the blonde Evie stubbornly insisted her cheap imitation stone was actually genuine. While Evie clutches her glowing stone, Yisriela calls her ignorant and claims her behavior shows a lack of respect. Irene stares down Yisriela, asking if she has forgotten that Irene is a prominent member of the powerful House Terran. Irene explains that her family handles the majority of magic stone auctions, and she was thoroughly trained in the business. Confidently, Irene declares there is no way she would fail to identify a genuine stone as simple as this one. Swearing on her family name, Irene confirms with absolute certainty that the object the blonde Evie holds is genuine. Looking up with wide, emerald eyes, the blonde Evie is struck by Irene's firm and unexpected defense of her gift. Irene turns her back on the stunned, red-haired Yisriela, walking past her without granting the noble girl another single glance. Approaching the blonde girl, Irene ignores everyone else and softly asks if Evie is all right after the harsh confrontation. Students whisper in shock that the high and mighty Lady Yisriela was actually mistaken after cornering the commoner so aggressively. Her face shadowed with shame and fury, Yisriela mutters to herself, unable to believe a commoner possesses a real stone. A group of girls looks on in concern as one asks the humiliated Yisriela if she is feeling all right. The freckled girl complains that Lady Irene was being far too harsh and has been acting too soft lately. A close-up on Yisriela's wide blue eye reveals her growing shock as she reflects on Irene's uncharacteristically emotional behavior. Turning back toward the departing pair, Yisriela realizes that the usually aloof Irene Terran has finally displayed a visible weakness. Irene looks down at the blonde Evie with a soft, protective gaze, her previous coldness vanishing in an instant. Her face slightly flushed with concern, Irene expresses how deeply she would have been affected if Evie had been hurt. Yisriela covers her mouth in pure astonishment, noting that she has never seen Irene show such raw, unprotected emotion. Yisriela watches them leave, realizing that the formidable Irene has developed a vulnerability that could be used against her. As the two girls walk away together, the scene shifts to the grand towers of the academy against a bright sky. Inside a sunlit office, a blonde man sits at a desk, the scene transitioning to reveal his focused work. A light scratch sounds as the man writes, a complex and elegant magical crest glowing on the back of his hand. The blonde man pauses his writing, looking to the side with a pensive expression as white flower petals drift nearby. The scene shifts to the academy towers under a full moon, reflecting the quiet atmosphere before the school's official opening. From behind, the blonde man sits in his ornate chair and calls out for his late-night visitor to come in. The bald administrator enters the room, apologizing to His Majesty for the late hour before beginning their urgent discussion. The blonde man inquires if the matter involves the child he personally selected for admission at the previous meeting.
The administrator confirms the identity and explains he is having difficulty selecting a proper guardian for this specific incoming student. Scattered documents on the dark floor represent the many people who, blinded by greed, are vying for the guardian position. Sighing in frustration, the king worries that no trustworthy person remains, as all decent candidates are already serving other students. The administrator suggests using a fictional person for the role, presenting a portrait of a professor who never returned from war. The blonde king asks for the name of this suitable professor while he continues to sit at his grand desk. With a formal bow, the administrator informs His Majesty that the chosen name for the child's guardian is Cien Roche. Flashback panels show the king taking on the role of Cien Roche as the young Evie celebrates her cool professor. Back in the present, the king reflects on taking responsibility for her through this secret identity while surrounded by paperwork. Looking at the massive pile of boxes, he notes his fortunate discovery that most people only send a single gift. The blonde man looks ahead with a serene, hopeful expression, wanting his gift to illuminate the lonely child's path. Beaming with pure happiness, the blonde Evie clutches the glowing stone that saved her from being alone in the dark. The discarded wooden box of pink-bowed shoes rests forgotten on a sofa as soft voice calls out to Ivy. Irene notices the torn wrapping paper inside Evie's box and questions why she bothered to keep it. Evie explains she wants to treasure every part of the gift sent by her precious guardian. Irene's temper flares at the thought of the bullies disrespecting such a sweet child's cherished gift. Despite the earlier humiliation, Evie offers a bright smile and reassures Irene that she feels much better. Reflecting on the situation, Evie realizes her current happiness far outweighs the pain of being teased. Contentment fills the blonde girl as she sits peacefully with the gift that changed her entire day. Surprised by the silver-haired girl's quick return, Evie questions why she isn't staying away until the evening. Flushing slightly, Irene claims she rushed back only because she forgot her hat and feared her family's nagging. Overcome with worry, Irene pulls Evie into a warm hug and offers to stay by her side. Evie beams with joy, expressing that simply knowing Irene helped her is enough to make her truly happy. When Evie mentions being grateful to keep the fake stone, Irene's expression shifts into one of genuine confusion. Irene firmly corrects the blonde girl, insisting that the object she is holding is indeed a genuine magic stone. Citing her family's ironclad motto regarding honesty, Irene confirms the high quality and authenticity of Evie's gift. Irene explains that while most powerful stones are in the palace, this rare light-emitting gem is no common knockoff. The girls discuss the rarity of magic stones, with Irene noting how much they fetch at elite auctions. Evie's world spins in shock as Irene estimates the value of her glowing stone at 10 million gold. While Irene notes the guardian's devotion, a sudden heavy tolling sounds from a nearby bell, signaling the time. With a quick grab of her belongings, the silver-haired Irene announces her immediate departure. Irene promises to return by dinner and is puzzled to hear that Evie still plans on attending classes. A moment of mutual surprise occurs when Irene reveals that there are actually no classes scheduled for today. Irene explains that Guardian's Day provides a day off for students, leaving the blonde girl momentarily stunned. Seizing the opportunity, Evie resolves to find the professor before sunset to express her heartfelt gratitude. A quick, dry rustle fills the air as the blonde girl pushes through the dense foliage in search of him. Evie worries the rare gift was sent by mistake and intends to offer its return, if necessary. Spotting a figure standing near a gravestone, Evie tentatively calls out for Professor Cien.
With a sense of urgency, she rushes toward the man, her voice echoing through the quiet, shaded area.
As the stone glows brightly in her hands, Evie announces her presence to the professor she has been seeking.